The dead birds Bern Marcus Chen had been tracking orbital debris from station Kepler-7 for 4 years, long enough to know that decommissioned satellites didn't execute autonomous maneuvers. They drifted. They tumbled. They obeyed the precise mathematical dictates of Newtonian mechanics, their trajectories as predictable as a precisely calibrated chronometer. Once factors such as solar radiation pressure, residual atmospheric drag at higher altitudes, and the subtle gravitational perturbations from the moon's irregular orbit were meticulously accounted for. NOAA 17 was categorized as one of those predictable inactive assets. The weather satellite had officially been decommissioned in 2013. After 2 decades of operational service, its hydrazine propellant tanks systematically purged through a series of controlled orbital burns that accurately positioned it into a designated graveyard orbit, 50 kilometers above its active operational altitude. This was standard end-of-life protocol. Elevate it sufficiently to prevent interference with active missions, allow its power cells to fully deplete, retract its solar panels to minimize collision cross-section, and consign it to drift inertly within the established orbital cemetery, where humanity meticulously parked its retired spacecraft. Marcus occupied a workstation within the debris tracking module, a constrained, specialized compartment within Kepler-7's primary habitat ring, surrounded by 6 high-resolution monitor screens meticulously displaying real-time orbital data streamed from the station's advanced phased array radar system. The radar methodically swept the celestial sphere in a pre-programmed sequence, monitoring over 34,000 objects exceeding 10 centimeters in dimension, ranging from fully operational satellites to minuscule paint flecks traversing at velocities up to 28,000 kilometers per hour. His primary directive was to continuously monitor the graveyard orbits, identify potential conjunctions that might generate novel debris fields, and diligently maintain the comprehensive catalog that served to prevent active missions from inadvertently encountering inactive hardware. The faint hum of the station's life support systems provided a constant, subtle counterpoint to the quiet whir of his workstation's cooling fans. It was precisely 0340 station time when the collision avoidance system independently flagged. NOAA 17, the alert materialized on his primary display. Critical yellow text indicating an unexpected trajectory deviation. Marcus promptly accessed the satellite's historical tracking data, anticipating the customary drift pattern, perhaps a minimal altitude adjustment attributable to fluctuating solar pressure variations or a minor rotational rate modification. Graveyard satellites were not entirely static. They exhibited minor positional variations within their designated zones, akin to vessels tethered on a mooring line. However, this was unequivocally not drift. The integrated radar data conclusively demonstrated that NOAA 17 had executed 3 precise thruster burns over the preceding 47 minutes. These were small magnitude burns, meticulously calculated to adjust its orbital inclination by 0.04 degrees and elevate its perigee by 1.2 kilometers. The burns were flawlessly timed, impeccably oriented, and executed with a degree of precision typically requiring active 3-axis stabilization and fully functional attitude control thrusters. Marcus cross-referenced the satellite's technical specifications on his secondary screen. NOAA 17, equipped with an advanced very high-resolution radiometer, a microwave sounding unit, and solar panels rated for an expected 15-year operational lifespan. Decommissioned March 2013. Hydrazine fuel was declared exhausted during disposal maneuvers. Battery cells expected operational life in graveyard orbit, a strict maximum of 6 months. Last confirmed signal reception, September 2013, 9 years prior. He initiated a comprehensive diagnostic sequence on the radar system, systematically verifying for calibration inaccuracies or signal processing aberrations. The system reported all parameters as nominal. He meticulously cross-referenced the tracking data with high-resolution optical telescope observations obtained from Kepler-7's secondary sensor array. The optical data unequivocally confirmed NOAA 17 had demonstrably altered its orbital parameters. Further spectroscopic analysis indicated thermal signatures, entirely consistent with hydrazine thruster, exhaust, the characteristic infrared spectral peak ice produced by the decomposition of N2H4 into nitrogen, hydrogen, and ammonia, except The satellite was officially recorded as having no remaining hydrazine propellant. Its tanks had been emptied 9 years ago. Marcus activated his primary comm panel, establishing a secure channel to the station's integral debris coordination officer. DCO, this is Tracking Technician Chen reporting. I've detected an anomalous burn signature originating from NOAA 17, requesting immediate verification and situational assessment. The response arrived after a calibrated 10-second delay, Sarah Okonkwo's voice, exhibiting professional efficiency despite the inconvenient hour. Copy that, Tracking. NOAA 17 is cataloged as a fully inactive asset. Please specify the nature of this anomaly. 3 distinct precision burns identified within the last hour. Evidence of inclination trajectory modification and perigee adjustment. My telemetry indicates thruster signatures fully consistent with active maneuvering. A prolonged silence permeated the channel. Subsequently, Marcus, that satellite has been powered down since 2013. I require you to execute a full diagnostic sweep on your entire sensor suite. An affirmative. DCO. Diagnostic protocols have already been completed. All systems are nominal. The observed burn events are verified as empirical and real. Another extended pause. Understood. Access the satellite's telemetry logs if your system can establish a connection. There might be residual data in the unit's memory causing phantom readings on our Endel. Marcus redirected his attention to his communications panel and initiated the complex sequence required for attempting access to NOAA 17's dormant telemetry system. Under normal parameters, this operation should have failed. The satellite's primary transmitter subsystem necessitated power input from solar panels that had been deliberately stowed 9 years ago. And even in the improbable event of panel deployment, the nickel-cadmium battery cells would have inevitably degraded beyond functional capacity due to prolonged radiation exposure and severe thermal cycling. However, when he transmitted the standard telemetry request ping, NOAA 17 responded immediately. The signal was received with remarkable clarity and robust strength. A clean carrier wave detected at 1698 MHz, delivering a data rate of 665 kilobits per second, employing the high-resolution picture transmission protocol that NOAA weather satellites had routinely utilized since the 1990s. Marcus observed his screen systematically, populating with incoming telemetry packets, meticulous housekeeping data, precise sensor readings, and comprehensive spacecraft status information. Solar array voltage output, 32.4 volts. This reading was demonstrably within its normal operational range. Battery charge level, 87%. This was an impossible reading for 9-year-old nickel-cadmium cells. Attitude control system status, active. 3-axis stabilized propulsion system status, fuel remaining 47.3 kilograms. Marcus found his gaze fixated on that final numerical value. NOAA 17 had been initially provisioned with 150 kilograms of hydrazine. The decommissioning burns meticulously. Executed in 2013 had consumed the entirety of its fuel. The disposal procedures explicitly mandated complete propellant depletion to avert any potential accidental explosions that could inadvertently generate hazardous debris fields. The official records definitively indicated 0 kilograms remaining. This incoming telemetry definitively claimed the satellite still possessed 47.3 kilograms of consumable. Filsey, he rapidly scrolled through the incoming data packets, actively searching for timestamp information to ascertain whether this was merely residual, outdated data being retransmitted. However, the timestamps were unequivocally current. 2024 to 11/14, 03 Frantieben 23 UTC. This was unequivocally real-time telemetry, originating from a satellite that was definitively classified as non-operational. Then he discovered the communications. Log NOAA 17 had been actively transmitting, not conventional atmospheric data. The satellite's infrared and microwave sensors had been powered down during its decommissioning. It was broadcasting encrypted data packets to a precise set of celestial coordinates. Right ascension 18H28M14s, declination 23.4709 at an estimated distance of 47.2 astronomical units. Marcus accessed his comprehensive astronomical catalog and initiated the coordinate conversion sequence. The designated target point was situated within the constellation Sagittarius, far beyond the established orbit of Neptune, extending into the distant Kuiper belt where the primary constituents were dust, ice, and the occasional minor planetary body. There was no known entity at that specified location that possessed the capability to receive satellite transmissions. Furthermore, no known entity at that location was cataloged that could conceivably communicate with a weather satellite specifically engineered for Earth orbit operations. Yet, NOA-17 had been broadcasting to those coordinates precisely every 14 hours for the past 9 years, according to the meticulously kept log. These were encrypted data packets, each comprising 4.7 megabytes of information per transmission, utilizing an encryption protocol that Marcus unequivocally did not recognize. It was not the standard AES or RSA algorithms routinely employed by conventional government satellites, but something fundamentally different, something that caused his embedded pattern recognition software to generate critical error codes whenever it attempted to analyze its intricate structure. The faint scent of ozone, usually indicative of high-energy discharge or electrical malfunction, briefly registered in his periphery, a subtle anomaly in the regulated air, and crucially, the satellite was receiving responses. The communications log explicitly detailed incoming transmissions originating from the identical coordinates, 47.2 AU distant, arriving at the satellite with a consistent delay time of 2 hours and 11 minutes per exchange. Marcus performed the necessary calculations in his head. The speed of light is precisely 299,792 kilometers per second at a distance of 47.2 AU, approximately 7.06 billion kilometers. A radio signal should theoretically require 6 hours and 33 minutes to complete a single one-way trip. Therefore, a complete round-trip communication delay would be an astronomical 13 hours and 6 minutes. But the log unequivocally showed 2-hour delays. This logically implied two possibilities. Either the fundamental laws of physics had been momentarily suspended for the exclusive benefit of NOA-17, or the transmissions were originating from a location significantly closer than 47.2 AU, a location that was somehow meticulously simulating its presence at those distant coordinates. Marcus perceived a subtle decrease in the ambient temperature within the tracking station, a normal environmental system fluctuation, not immediately alarming, but it served to emphasize the profound silence enveloping him. Kepler-7 functioned primarily as a research station, not a massive installation. At 0400 hours, the vast majority of the 15-person crew was typically in a state of sleep. The station's interconnected habitat modules were distributed across a rotating wheel structure, and he was currently isolated within the dedicated debris tracking spoke, spatially separated from the nearest occupied module by a span of 200 meters of pressurized corridor and the pervasive vacuum of space. He initiated a comprehensive, detailed analysis of the most recent transmission event. The data packet in question had been dispatched precisely 47 minutes prior, coinciding almost exactly with the satellite's initial thruster burn. The corresponding response had arrived a mere 2 hours and 11 minutes later, and a scant 30 seconds following that response, NOA-17 had performed its second precision burn, as if the satellite was actively receiving explicit instructions. Marcus then accessed the satellite's historical command logs, fully expecting to discover evidence of ground station uploads, perhaps a clandestine reactivation of the unit by NOAA for some undisclosed mission objective. However, the command log meticulously recorded no ground station activity whatsoever since 2013. The only recorded commands originated from the satellite's own autonomous operational systems, executing pre-programmed sequences that, according to their embedded timestamps, had been originally uploaded in 2004, a full 9 years prior to its decommissioning, except the command code itself was fundamentally incorrect. Marcus possessed extensive experience reviewing sufficient satellite programming paradigms to readily identify standard operational protocols. This particular code was clearly formulated in a programming language he did not recognize. It was neither C++ nor Python, nor any established aerospace standard programming framework. The syntax employed mathematical operators that had no known existence within conventional computing architectures, symbols that bore a superficial resemblance to derivatives of calculus notation interspersed with logic, gates he had never before encountered, meticulously isolated one specific command sequence and then ran it through his advanced translation software, attempting to parse its fundamental intent. The software immediately crashed. He attempted the process again with a significantly smaller sample. This time, the software returned a partial translation, which remained utterly nonsensical. Adjust orbital resonance to match receiver harmonic at 0.0047 Hz. Modulation depth for phase-locked synchronization with remote aperture. Remote aperture. This phrasing implied that the satellite was functioning as an integrated component of a much larger receiving system, actively synchronizing its operational parameters with an unknown entity situated at those remote, distant coordinates. Marcus queued up the real-time telemetry stream and observed the continuous data flow. NOAA 17's solar panels, which were officially designated as folded and inactive, were conspicuously registering active power generation. The satellite's orientation was also profoundly incorrect. Instead of the random, uncontrolled tumbling characteristic of inert spacecraft, it was meticulously maintaining a precise three-axis lock, specifically pointing one particular face directly toward that Sagittarius coordinate. His radar system detected the third burn event precisely as it occurred. A brief, discrete thruster pulse lasting 0.3 seconds, generating 45 newtons of thrust. The satellite's orbital trajectory adjusted by yet another fractional degree. The efficiency exhibited was far superior to anything human engineers had designed spacecraft to achieve. Marcus rapidly accessed the optical telescope control system and precisely aimed it at NOAA 17's current position. The resulting image materialized on his screen after the required 17-second integration time, a distinctly bright, elongated dot positioned against a backdrop of myriad stars, its elongated shape indicative of the satellite's cylindrical structure. He increased the magnification, pushing the advanced telescope to its absolute resolution limit. The satellite's solar panels were unequivocally deployed. They were fully extended, actively collecting sunlight, glinting with the characteristic blue-tinted reflection of gallium arsenide photovoltaic cells. They should not be deployed. The decommissioning procedures explicitly mandated panel folding to significantly reduce its collision cross-section profile. But there was another, more concerning element. The satellite's main antenna dish, a relatively small parabolic reflector typically utilized for data relay, was fully extended and actively tracking. Marcus could distinctly observe the dish executing minute movements in the telescope's high-resolution mode, making subtle adjustments as it followed some unseen, unknown target. He meticulously calculated the dish's precise pointing vector based on its observed orientation. It was undeniably aimed directly at Sagittarius. Specifically at those exact coordinates, 18-inch 28-month 14s, 23 47 099. A new data packet then appeared in the communications log. It indicated an incoming transmission, currently being received. Marcus observed the data packet systematically populating his screen. 4.7 megabytes, heavily encrypted, time-stamped 034752 UTC. This was precisely 2 hours and 11 minutes after NOAA 17's preceding outgoing transmission. And then, his own communication system spontaneously activated. Not the conventional satellite link. This was his station's internal comm panel, the dedicated system utilized for crew-to-crew discourse within Kepler-7. The panel illuminated, indicating an incoming message, but the source identification was severely corrupted. Merely a string of illegible characters that bore a resemblance to coordinate notation mixed with hexadecimal code. Marcus hesitated, his hand momentarily suspended above the illuminated accept button. Station protocol strictly mandated explicit source verification prior to accepting any communication, yet the system was displaying the message as originating from within Kepler-7's secure internal network. He accepted the incoming communication. The message materialized as raw text on his primary screen, but its inherent formatting was profoundly irregular. The characters, though standard ASCII, were arranged in columns that produced a complex three-dimensional pattern, akin to perceiving text through multiple superimposed translucent layers. It required a significant moment for him to accurately parse its intended meaning. Technician Chen confirmed receipt of telemetry analysis. Satellite NOAA 17, Operating within established parameters. Do not attempt signal interruption. Communication. Cycle must complete. Response transmission arriving in 47. Marcus stared intently at the message. No other personnel on the station were aware of his ongoing analysis of NOA-17. He had not yet formally filed a report. The message had been transmitted to him before he could have possibly communicated his findings to anyone else on board. The digital countdown methodically. Advanced Zoo 0043. He quickly reviewed the satellite's telemetry data. NOA-17 was unmistakably preparing for another transmission. Power was being actively routed to the main antenna. Thermal systems were initiating cooling protocols for the transmitter circuits, and attitude thrusters were executing micro-adjustments to meticulously optimize the signal path. Darn 38. Marcus re-established a secure channel to Sarah Okonkwo. DCO, I require your immediate attention to something critical. I am forwarding the telemetry data from NOA-17 to your terminal right now. Now copy that, Marcus. What exactly am I looking at? The unit is not inert. It is actively maneuvering and engaged in communication with an unknown entity, situated 47 AU away. Sarah's immediate reply was both sharp and incredulous. That is fundamentally impossible. Execute another comprehensive diagnostic procedure. I have already executed 3 comprehensive diagnostic sweeps. The satellite empirically possesses fuel, power, and fully active operational systems. Furthermore, I just received an internal communication explicitly instructing me not to interfere with its transmission cycle. A profound silence descended upon the channel. Then Sarah's voice carefully modulated. Marcus, identify the source of that message. Source is unknown. It's originating from within our network architecture, but the identification protocol is corrupted. GTAX 22, the telemetry feed clearly depicted NOA-17's transmitter system activating. A distinct power surge registered at the antenna. The carrier wave was establishing, and the subsequent data packet was queuing for immediate transmission. Marcus observed the satellite's complex systems coordinating with an unparalleled precision that should not exist in 9-year-old, theoretically obsolete hardware. Sarah, the satellite is poised to transmit again. The message indicates a response is due to arrive in A. He rapidly checked the countdown. 19 seconds. A response from what exactly? I'm currently unable to identify. Something located at coordinates that would necessitate a 6-hour light speed delay, yet the recorded responses are arriving within 2 hours. Rory Trunk 11. Marcus immediately accessed every available sensor feed. Radar, optical telescope, communications array, spectrum analyzer. He meticulously concentrated all of them on NOA-17, recording every quantifiable parameter. Dota 5, the satellite transmitted. Marcus observed the data packet departing as a tightly focused microwave burst, highly concentrated and immensely powerful, accelerating toward those Sagittarius coordinates. At the undisputed speed of light, and the response arrived, not in 2 hours, instantly. The communications log explicitly registered an incoming transmission at the exact moment NOA-17 completed its outgoing broadcast. It utilized the identical encryption protocol, possessing the identical data structure, but this response had arrived instantaneously, as if it had been persistently waiting, precisely cued and prepared to transmit the very instant the satellite's message was conclusively processed. Marcus's hands grew cold. Instantaneous communication across a vast distance of 47 AU represented an absolute violation of causality. It violated every fundamental principle he understood. His screen then flooded with a cascade of new data, not originating from NOA-17 exclusively, but from his own station's integrated systems. Environmental sensors strategically positioned throughout. Kepler-7 were now registering demonstrable anomalies. Measurable temperature fluctuations of 0.3 degrees Celsius in multiple habitat modules, significant electromagnetic interference propagating through the primary power distribution network, and discernible air pressure variations of 0.02 psi in sections that were designed to be hermetically sealed and intrinsically stable. And the message reappeared on his comm panel. Response cycle complete. Satellite NOA-17 will execute final orbital adjustment in 15. Technician Chen will observe without intervention. This communication serves as acknowledgement of your participation in monitoring, protocol participation, as if he had willingly consented to some unknown design. His professional instincts screamed for protocol adherence, yet the situation defied all established procedures. Marcus rapidly reviewed the satellite's projected trajectory. This NOAA final orbital adjustment would meticulously position NOAA 17 into a highly elliptical orbital path, one that would, in approximately 9 months, bring it sufficiently close to Kepler 7 to permit direct visual observation without the aid of specialized telescopes. Sarah's voice crackled emphatically over the comm. Marcus, I am receiving multiple critical alerts from the environmental systems. Are you correlating this data? An affirmative, DCO, station-wide anomalies. They commenced precisely when the satellite registered its incoming response. What response? The light speed delay from 47 AU is 6 hours one way. The response arrived instantaneously. Sarah. 0 perceptible delay. He could distinctly perceive her controlled breathing over the channel. Her cognitive process is attempting to reconcile the profound impossibility. Then, I am initiating a communication with the commander. Do not initiate any further actions until we comprehensively ascertain the unfolding situation. But Marcus was already intently observing the digital countdown, 00:01:47, remaining until the final critical burn. He zoomed the optical telescope to its absolute maximum magnification setting, focusing entirely on NOAA 17. The satellite remained suspended rigidly within his view, its solar panels extended like iridescent mechanical wings, its antenna dish meticulously tracking that impossible celestial coordinate. And within the telescope's high-resolution mode, he discerned an additional detail, something that compelled him to lean instinctively closer to the screen, his eyes squinting to clarify the image. The satellite's external surface exhibited distinct alterations. Novel structures had visibly materialized. Previously unrecorded antenna arrays that were absent in the archived launch photographs, enigmatic sensor blisters that did not conform to its original engineering specifications, and intricate geometric patterns meticulously etched into the solar panels that bore a resemblance to advanced circuitry, but adhered to no known electronic design he recognized. 58th Marcus accessed the satellite's internal camera, a fisheye lens, usually mounted within its equipment bay for diagnostic engineering purposes. The camera should technically be devoid of power, yet when he transmitted the activation command, the live feed immediately materialized on his screen. The satellite's interior was irrevocably altered. The robust equipment racks that were originally slated to contain weather sensors and data processors had been either systematically replaced or subtly transformed into structures that were simultaneously organic and technological in their manifestation. Crystalline lattice formations conspicuously grew between previously conventional circuit boards. The metallic chassis contoured into curves that defied the established principles of manufactured materials. And at the precise volumetric center of the equipment bay, where the primary processor unit should have resided, existed an entity that pulsed with rhythmic light, reminiscent of a biological heartbeat, glowing with the identical infrared signature his thermal sensors had initially detected. 31. The pulsing intensified, accelerating rhythmically. Marcus continued to observe the internal camera feed as the burgeoning crystalline structures began to resonate, vibrating at frequencies that generated distinct interference patterns within the video stream. The light emanating from the central entity intensified dramatically, and for a fleeting moment, less than a full second, the camera captured an image that caused Marcus's breath to seize in his chest, a pronounced reflection within the highly polished metallic surface of the equipment rack, not a reflection of the satellite's internal components, but of something profoundly different, a distinct space, a room, complete with consoles displaying data and multiple active screens, and a discernible figure seated at a tracking station, intently observing numerous monitors, watching him. The figure was attired in a standard-issue Kepler 7 station uniform. The face was largely obscured by the inherent distortion of the reflection, yet the body language was undeniably familiar. The precise manner in which the individual sat, the specific angle of the head, the overall posture. Marcus instinctively glanced down at his own reflection, clearly visible within his monitor screen. The identical posture. The identical uniform. Yo 15. He immediately terminated the camera feed, his heart vigorously hammering against his ribs. The environmental alerts across the station intensified rapidly. Critical temperature deviations, pronounced pressure fluctuations, and pervasive electromagnetic disturbances spreading through modules that were designed to remain rigorously stable and environmentally controlled. Sarah's voice, urgently. Marcus, the commander, is explicitly ordering you to terminate your connection to NOA 17 immediately. Disengage all telemetry links. His fingers gravitated toward the disconnect command, yet halted abruptly as another message materialized. Termination of telemetry. Link will result in loss of containment synchronization. Satellite orbital adjustment serves as harmonic lock for station environmental stability. Disconnection not advised. Sarah, I believe the satellite's transmission is somehow directly affecting the station's stability. If I disconnect and undo it regardless, that is a direct order from command. 008. Marcus's hand remained suspended just above the disconnect command. The cascading environmental alerts were rapidly transitioning into critical status. Widespread power fluctuations, severe life support anomalies, and structural stress readings that strongly indicated the habitat modules were enduring forces they were not engineered to. With Standor 005, he made his definitive decision and reached for the disconnect interface, the final burn. Executed NOA 17's thrusters fired with an astonishing precision that utterly defied its official inert status, meticulously adjusting the satellite's orbit in a complex maneuver that altered its trajectory by an exact margin of 2.847 degrees. And at the precise moment the burn concluded, every single environmental alert across Kepler-7 simultaneously extinguished. Temperature readings, nominal. Pressure readings, nominal. Power distribution network, stable. As if the preceding critical events had simply never occurred. Marcus remained frozen in his chair, his gaze fixed upon his screens. The telemetry now showed NOA 17 resuming its new, defined orbit, its integrated systems powering down, its solar panels systematically beginning to retract into their original stowed configuration. The satellite was progressively returning to silence. His comm panel displayed one final, succinct message: monitoring protocol complete. Technician Chen's participation acknowledged. Next observation. Window, 287 days, 14 hours, 33 minutes. Maintain current tracking protocols. Satellite will return to observable range at specified time. The message vanished. The telemetry link automatically terminated its connection. NOA 17 fell completely silent, its systems definitively shutting down. Its impossible fuel reserves somehow inexplicably depleted once again. Returning to the designated inert status it should never have departed. Protocol was violated at 0347. Marcus diligently accessed the satellite's newly established orbital parameters and initiated a precise calculation. In precisely 287 days, NOA 17 would pass within a mere 400 kilometers of Kepler-7, sufficiently close to be directly visible with the unaided eye through the station's primary observation ports. Close, enough to establish direct visual contact. Sarah's voice crackled. Over the comlink. Marcus, immediate status report. What just transpired? He looked intently at his screens, at the now silent satellite, at the environmental readings that had inexplicably returned to nominal levels as if the station had never experienced such pervasive distress. He reflected upon the enigmatic figure in the reflection, seated at a tracking station, observing monitors clad in his uniform, seemingly occupying his designated workspace. The satellite successfully completed its programmed maneuver, he stated carefully, his voice betraying no inflection. All systems are currently reported as nominal. The unit has returned to a silent operational state. And the environmental alerts, and all cleared. Everything has reverted to baseline parameters. A prolonged pause filled the channel's silence. Then, we will require a comprehensive incident report, Marcus. Commander intends to rigorously review all your acquired data prior to filing anything with ground control. Now copy that. DCO.ul Marcus terminated the comm link and remained seated in the profound silence of the tracking station. Outside, through the reinforced small porthole integrated into the module wall, he observed the star field slowly rotating as Kepler-7 meticulously maintained its orbital trajectory. Somewhere out in that vast expanse, Noah A-17 drifted silently in its newly defined trajectory, carrying its impossible fuel, its profoundly transformed interior, and its inexplicable connection to something 47 AU distant that demonstrably responded to transmissions before they were even definitively sent. He accessed his tracking software and meticulously set a high-priority alert for 287 days. Hence, when the satellite inevitably returned, he would be vigilantly observing, and he harbored an increasingly profound certainty that whatever entity resided within Noah 17, whatever had silently gazed back at him through that distorted reflection, would be diligently observing in return. Midnight dispatch. The third-floor dispatch center was a pool of sterile, artificial light in the sleeping city, a concrete fortress against the deep quiet of the early morning hours. Timestamp 03/42/17. For Carter, it was his fishbowl. He sat before a bank of 6 monitors, the glow reflecting off his glasses, each screen a different window into the city's slumbering turmoil. The main display showed the CAD map, a web of glowing streets. To its left, the active call queue, mercifully empty. To its right, the radio log, a slow crawl of unit status updates. The air conditioning hummed, a constant drone that carried the faint metallic tang of dust burning on hot electronics and the lingering scent of burnt coffee from a pot brewed hours ago. Most nights were a slow drip of non-emergencies logged with procedural detachment. Noise complaints, fender benders, the occasional drunken disorderly routed to patrol. Logged, dispatched, forgotten. It was a job of immense, crushing boredom punctuated by moments of sheer heart-stopping terror. Timestamp 03/44/02. Tonight was shaping up to be the former. The clock in the bottom right of his primary monitor glowed 3:44 a.m. He was idly tracing the grid of city streets on his main map display, watching a lone street sweeper icon crawl down a deserted boulevard, when a light on his fourth monitor blinked amber, not a flashing red 911, but a call routed from the non-emergency line flagged by the system as open line audible BKG. Usually a pocket dial, or someone who had fallen asleep with their phone in hand. He clicked to accept, the audio feeding into his headset. The system auto-generated a preliminary incident number, TRC 734. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to close it out. 1. What's your emergency? He recited, his voice flat with the practiced emotionless neutrality required by departmental protocol. For a moment, only the faint, airy hiss of an open connection answered him. He was about to repeat the phrase when a sound so small he almost missed it trickled through the static, a hiccup, a choked-back sob, thin and fragile. Hello? This is 911 dispatch. Is anyone there? Carter's tone shifted almost imperceptibly, a hint of focused concern bleeding through the practiced calm. A tiny voice, thin and trembling, whispered into the void. He's coming. Carter sat ramrod straight, his lethargy evaporating like smoke in a gale. His fingers flew across the keyboard, overriding the preliminary routing. He elevated the call to a priority 1, initiating a phase 2 E911 trace. The system began triangulating, the icon on his map pulsing as it sought a lock. 03/45/10. Log. Caller. TRC 734 is juvenile female, distressed. Okay, honey, I'm here. My name is Carter. Can you tell me your name? Lily, the voice whispered. The audio was thin, compressed. I'm in the closet. Okay, Lily, you're doing great. You're being very brave. Can you tell me what's happening? Who's coming? The bad man, she said, her voice catching on a sob that scraped across the line. He's looking for me. I heard Mommy. What followed was not a vocalization, but a sharp intake of breath, a sound of remembered horror that made the hairs on Carter's arms stand up. She made a bad noise. Carter's heart hammered against his ribs. The trace was slow, bouncing between cell towers, the search radius still frustratingly wide. West side of the city, blocks of it. Okay, Lily, stay as quiet as you can. I am sending help right now. Can you tell me what your address is? Any numbers on your house? A shuffling sound came through the headset, Fabric against plastic, then a muffled thump. Lily's breathing was ragged, a frantic counterpoint to the line's static. I don't know. It's the yellow house. With the blue door? Not enough. Not nearly enough. The trace narrowed slightly, then widened again. Lily, is your daddy home? A pause that stretched for an eternity. The silence was heavier than any sound. He's the bad man. A cold dread, colder than the overzealous air conditioning, washed over Carter. He forced his voice to remain level, a calm anchor in her storm of terror. His training kicked in. Maintain control, reassure the caller, gather information. Okay, Lily, I'm still here with you. Don't hang up the phone. Help is on the way. The trace finally resolved, locking onto a single point. An address flashed on his screen in bold red letters. 1428 Elm Street, a quiet residential area. He double-clicked the address, routing the call details and a child in danger flag to the nearest available unit. Unit 7, a senior officer named Henderson. ETA 4 minutes. They're on their way, Lily. Officer Henderson is coming. Just 4 minutes. Can you stay on the line with me? He's on the stairs, she whimpered. The words were barely audible. The floorboards are creaking. Carter could hear it too, a faint rhythmic groaning in the background of the call. It was a sound that didn't belong with the terrified whispers of a child. It was slow, deliberate, heavy. Lily, don't make a sound, Carter whispered into his mic, as if the man could hear him through the phone. He gestured frantically to his supervisor, Maria, pointing at his screen. She was on another call, her face a mask of concentration. The creaking stopped. A door opened. Carter could hear the faint click of a latch. Lily? A deep voice called out. A man's voice, but it was wrong. It was slurred, distorted, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Where are you, little flower? Daddy wants to give you a hug. Her terrified vocalization echoed in his ear, sharp and piercing before it was abruptly cut off. It was followed by a wet, heavy thud, then silence. Lily? Carter's voice was hoarse. Lily, are you there? Nothing. Just the dead, empty hiss of an open line. His screen told him the call was still connected. He sat frozen, listening to nothing, his hand hovering over the disconnect button. Maria appeared at his shoulder, her face a stern mask. Carter, what's the holdup on TRC 734? You're compromising queue integrity. There was a kid. Maria. A man. Something neutralized her. Dars referred to Manual Section 4, Paragraph B. Silent open lines must be terminated after a 30-second interval to maintain queue availability. Her tone was clipped, but her eyes scanned the frantic notes on his screen. The unit is on scene, she conceded, her voice softening slightly. Let Henderson do his job. Disconnect and be ready for the next call. Reluctantly, his finger moved, but just as he was about to click, a voice, clipped and professional, crackled through his secondary radio channel. It was Officer Henderson. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm at 1428 Elm Street. Can you confirm the nature of the call? CAD notes are active DV with a juvenile on an open line, but the property is dark, 1022. Carter lunged for the push-to-talk button on his console. Unit 7, this is Dispatcher Carter. That is affirmative. I have an open line with a child at that location. Possible domestic violence in progress. Perpetrator may be on scene. Child's name is Lily. She states she is hiding in a closet. There was a momentary pause on Henderson's end. Carter, I'm on the front porch. The house is completely dark. No signs of forced entry. Front door is unlocked. She said she was hiding, Henderson. She said her father was the aggressor. 10-4. Henderson replied, his voice tight. I'm making entry. Recommend starting medical and a supervisor. Going radio silent for entry. Carter listened. His world shrunk to the twin sounds of dead air from Lily's phone and the faint static of Henderson's now open comms channel. He could hear the officer's soft footsteps on what must have been a hardwood floor. A click, then the sweep of a flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Audible only as the subtle shift in room tone. Fitch-1. Tuse dispatch. This is Unit 7. I'm inside, Henderson reported. His voice was a low murmur. The house is cold. Colder than ambient outside. Power's on, but it feels like the heat's been off for days. No signs of a disturbance in the entryway or living room. Place is clean. Too clean. Carter's knuckles were white as he gripped his desk. 03-5145. CAD log. Dispatcher Carter requests supervisor to position. Check upstairs, Henderson. Carter transmitted. his voice low. She said he was on the stairs. He heard Henderson's heavy boots ascending a staircase, the deliberate creaks echoing the ones he'd heard on Lily's end. It sent an icy shiver down his spine. 52, 30, upstairs is clear. Hallway secure, 2 bedrooms and a bath. Checking the master bedroom now. A pause stretched, filled only with the sound of Henderson's breathing. Then the tone changed. It lost its procedural edge. Dispatch. I have 2 adults. Code black, in the bed. They're gone. What's the cause? Carter demanded, his voice cracking. Is there dark residue? Negative, dispatch. No dark residue, no signs of a struggle. No visible trauma. It's like they just went to sleep and never woke up. The room is immaculate. No signs of foul play. I'll wait for the coroner, but this isn't a violent crime scene, Carter. Ambient temperature in here is even lower. Maybe 50 degrees, and Carter's mind reeled. The thud, the father's distorted voice. The girl, Henderson. Lily, find the girl. There's one more room, Henderson said, his voice grim. Looks like a kid's room. It's all pink, more footsteps. Carter could hear the door swing open. Dispatch, the room is empty. Bed is made. Toys are on the shelves. No one's in here. The closet, Henderson. She said she was in the closet. The line was silent for a moment, save for Henderson's steady breathing. Carter, the closet door is open. It's empty. Just some clothes, a few boxes. That can't be right, Carter insisted, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She was there. I heard her. I heard him. Hold on, Henderson said. There's something on the back wall of the closet. Scuff marks. No, they're scratches. Like from fingernails, all clustered together. A new sound entered the feed, a scraping wooden sound. There's a false back panel here, Henderson said, his voice filled with a new tension. It's been pushed ajar from the inside. Carter held his breath. He could hear Henderson grunting with effort as he pulled the panel away. It's a little space back here, Henderson said, his voice slightly muffled. Barely big enough for a child. It's dark. Empty except for... Wait! There was a rustling sound. There's a phone on the floor. An old cell phone. The screen is on. It's connected to an active call. A wave of nausea hit Carter. His monitor confirmed it. The line was still open. He was connected to the phone in Henderson's hand. Carter. Henderson's voice was low, and for the first time, it held a note of something other than professional calm. It held fear. Who did you say you were talking to? Lily, Carter stammered. Her name is Lily. A long, heavy silence stretched. Carter could hear the distant wail of the approaching coroner's van through Henderson's radio. That's impossible, Henderson said finally, his voice a strained whisper. I was the responding officer on that call too, a year ago.
The whole family.
Carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace. Tragic but not violent. There was no dark residue. The ME confirmed it. The girl? Carter could barely form the words. What about the girl? Henderson's voice was flat, dead. A final report delivered from a place Carter never wanted to see. She made it to the closet. Hid behind a false back she must have found. We found the figure a day later. She didn't make it, Carter. He was still processing the words when Henderson spoke again, his voice cracking. Her name was Lily. As the full weight of Henderson's words crashed down on him, Carter stared at the blinking light on his console. The light that represented a terrified little girl. The light that represented a phone clutched in a dead hand, inside a hidden tomb for the last year. Then, from his headset, from the open line to the phone in the closet, a single, clear sound cut through the static. A soft, childish giggle. The call disconnected. Carter was placed on mandatory administrative leave. Paid, but it felt like a punishment. He sat in his darkened apartment for a week, the silence a roaring, echoing accusation. He couldn't sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw the red glow of the locked address on his map and heard the symphony from his own personal hell. The creaking stairs, the distorted voice, the wet thud, the giggle. The department's internal affairs division had him see a shrink, a woman with a kind face and clinical eyes who took copious notes. They called it an acute stress reaction, post-traumatic stress. They said the mind can play tricks on you under the immense pressure of the job, creating auditory hallucinations from static and stress. They said he had conflated 2 separate traumatic events. He must have imagined the details. a waking nightmare brought on by the demands of the graveyard shift. But Henderson had heard it too, he insisted. A single clear giggle before the line went dead. They interviewed Henderson, who reluctantly admitted he might have heard something, but it was just as likely feedback, a radio blip, or static. They told Carter he was mistaken. Carter knew what he had heard. The sound was etched into his auditory cortex. On his last day before returning to the fishbowl, he did something that could get him fired. He used his credentials to access the department's remote archives from his home computer, navigating through layers of security to the audio logs from that night. He found the file, TRC 734, the Midnight Dispatch. 18 minutes, 22 seconds. He sat in the dark, put on his professional AKG headphones, the same model he used at work, and hit play. "Wevan, what's your emergency?" His own voice, a lifetime ago. "He's coming." The tiny, terrified whisper of a presence, a voice from a place that shouldn't have a phone line. He listened to the entire agonizing recording. He traced the event's waveform on his screen, a jagged line of terror. The creaking floorboards, a low-frequency groan, the monstrous, syrupy voice of the father, its frequency distorted and unnatural, the final terrible thud, a sharp peak in the audio spectrum, the long minutes of agonizing silence, represented by a nearly flat line of hiss. He heard his own panicked conversation with Henderson, his voice strained and high. He heard the officer's methodical search, his dawning horror. He heard Henderson say with chilling finality, "Her name was Lily," and then the giggle. It spiked the meter, clear as a bell, a sound of pure, innocent mirth that was the most profoundly terrifying thing he had ever heard. He was about to close the file, to delete his access logs and try to bury it forever, when he decided to do one last thing. He zoomed in on the very end of the recording. He let the file play past the disconnect, into the 4.7 seconds of digital silence that the system records by default buffer. For 2 seconds, there was nothing but the low-level hum of the system's noise floor. And then, a new sound registered, a transient anomaly in the waveform he'd almost missed. It was not the girl. It was not the father. It was a voice he'd never heard. A dry, impossibly close rasping whisper like dead leaves skittering across pavement, or the scrape of sand on bone. It spoke a single word from the abyss, a promise and a threat. Again. The engineer's gambit. The Hephaestus geothermal plant was a titan of engineering, a steel heart buried deep within the Earth's crust, pumping terawatts of life to the sleeping cities on the surface. For Ilara, the sole night shift engineer on duty for this 12-hour cycle, it was a kingdom of solitude, a labyrinth of humming turbines, steam-wreathed pipes, and the constant low thrum of the planet's own breathing, transmitted through the foundations. She was a master of this domain, her senses honed by years of service, attuned to every hiss from a pressure gasket, every clank of a switching relay, every subtle change in heat or vibration that signaled the health of the colossal machine she tended. Her console, a sweeping arc of monitors and glowing readouts, was her oracle. Its soft glow was the only light source in the cavernous control room. Tonight the oracle was troubled. 23/47, 12. A series of minute rhythmic tremors had begun registering from the deepest seismic sensors, far below the main drilling bore. They were too consistent for natural seismic activity, too faint for a mechanical malfunction. The signature felt biological, like a slow, deep heartbeat resonating at 0.2 has in 4 kL. "I'm logging anomalous pressure readings and seismic spikes," she reported, her voice tight, the words echoing slightly in the vast control room. "Alert is confirmed. Protocol violation at 2347. Turbine 7 parameters are off nominal. I'm proceeding to sub-level gamma for diagnostics." Her supervisor's voice, crackling over the comms with a layer of static, was a comforting tether to the world above. Pre-4831. Acknowledged, Ilara. Keep me posted. Comms channel open. The models show everything is stable. Probably just a sensor presence. Ilara grabbed her diagnostic toolkit and a heavy-duty flashlight. Its beam a reassuring sword of light against the oppressive darkness of the lower levels. The elevator descended with a low hydraulic hum, each floor marked by a synthesized chime, a deeper plunge into the planet's warmth. Sub-level gamma was the domain of the primary conduits, massive arteries of reinforced steel that drew superheated steam directly from the mantle tap. The air here was always hot, thick with the smell of sulfur and superheated metal. The humidity was near 100%, clinging to her skin instantly. The fluctuations were centered around a maintenance junction, a nexus of pipes and pressure valves that hadn't been serviced in years, designated MJ7B. The access panel was stiff, coated in a gritty layer of mineral deposits and something slick like old lubricant. A tangible resistance met her hands. It groaned in protest as she wrenched it open on its corroded hinges. A gust of foul ancient air washed over her, a stench not of sulfur but of decay. A wet, organic smell that had no place in this sterile, metallic world. Her light cut through the billowing steam, revealing the source of the problem. A thick, pulsating membrane of something that looked like interwoven sinew had grown over the conduit, constricting it like a tourniquet. It was dark, a deep visceral red, and it throbbed in time with the tremor she had seen on her screen. It was alive. The light from her flashlight seemed to get absorbed by its surface, reflecting almost nothing back. She backed away slowly, her hand reaching for her comms unit. Year 215, Kale. You're not going to believe this. There's a growth on the primary conduit for Turbine 7. It's organic, confirming visual observation of biological obstruction at MJ7B. A burst of static. Then Kale's strained voice. You're 240. That's impossible, Ilara. Environmental scan shows 0 biologicals below sub-level beta. It has to be some kind of mineral deposit. A unique geological formation. Albert 0250. Minerals don't pulsate, Kyle. They don't. Leak dark residue, she whispered. As she spoke, a fissure appeared on the membrane's surface and a trickle of viscous dark residue oozed out, sizzling as it hit the hot metal floor with a sound like water on a skillet. The rhythmic tremor intensified, a low groan that vibrated through the soles of her boots. It was the sound of something vast stirring in its sleep. Dar 321. Get a sample. Kale ordered, his voice now tight with a new kind of tension, the professional curiosity warring with alarm. Follow Hazmat Protocol 1137C for unknown biologicals. Bag it, double seal, and get it to the surface lab. But be careful. Do not, under any circumstances, compromise the conduit's integrity. Ilara's training took over, a cold wave of professionalism washing over the hot spike of fear. She approached the membrane, her sample kit ready. As she extended the sterile collection tongs, the membrane violently contracted, like a muscle flinching from a needle. The entire sublevel groaned, the metal plates beneath her feet shifting, and a deep, guttural bellow echoed up from the drilling bore, a sound so profound it felt less heard and more imprinted directly onto her bones. On her console, which she could now only picture in her mind, every alarm would be blaring. The core pressure wasn't just fluctuating, it was climbing, a steady, ravenous ascent logged by the second. The plant wasn't just generating power, it was feeding something, pumping thermal energy directly into the living mass below. 4, 5, 10. It isn't a malfunction, Kale, she said, her voice strained, breathing heavily into the mic. The pressure buildup isn't a symptom, it's the goal. It's hungry. Kale's reply was frantic. 105.25. Hungry? Ilara, that's not a recognized system state. As per Regulation 4.19, catastrophic system failure imminent, evacuate immediately. That's a verified order. But it was too late. The heavy steel door to the maintenance junction slammed shut, the hydraulic locking mechanism grinding into place with a deafening finality. The main lights flickered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness, broken only by the hellish red pulse of the emergency strobes and the faint, sickening bioluminescent throb of the membrane. She was trapped with a piece of a much larger, and now much angrier, organism. The plant had been built on the dormant form of a subterranean leviathan, and for decades, it had been unknowingly nursing it, feeding it. Now it was waking up. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Ilara's mind, honed by years of crisis management, raced through schematics and emergency protocols memorized from binders thick with dust. The membrane was constricting the flow, causing the pressure to build. If the pressure wasn't released, the entire plant would go critical, a man-made volcano in the heart of the continent. But releasing the pressure meant feeding the creature, giving it the very energy it craved. It was a perfect predatory trap. Her comm crackled. There you say 40 Ilara. The door's sealed from your side. It's a localized failsafe. I can't override it. What's happening? Hurricane 658. It's isolating its food source, Kale. she yelled over the rising cacophony of alarms. The plant's own safety logic is working against us. It's trying to protect the core by sealing the damaged sector. She had one desperate gambit. The emergency purge system, Cerberus protocol. A last-ditch protocol designed to vent the entire geothermal reservoir in case of an uncontrollable pressure spike. It would dump trillions of gallons of supercooled water from the subterranean aquifers into the mantle tap. A thermal shock of such magnitude it would instantly neutralize all geothermal activity, effectively flash freezing the core and rendering the plant inert, and she hoped shocking the creature back into dormancy, or at least hurting it enough to make it let go. To do it, she had to get past the membrane and reach the manual override valve in the maintenance tunnel beyond. Taking a deep breath of the hot, cloying air, Ilara aimed her flashlight at the pulsating mass. It recoiled from the intense beam, a low hiss emanating from its surface as its tissues photoshocked. It didn't like the light. It gave her an idea. She found a discarded length of heavy conduit pipe on the floor. A blunt object designed to withstand thousands of psi. It would have to do. 9. Kyle. I'm going for the Cerberus purge valve, she stated, her voice grimly determined. If I do this, Hephaestus goes dark. For good. Near 0925. Just stay alive, Ilara, was the choked reply. She moved, using her flashlight as a shield, keeping the beam trained on the membrane. It writhed, pulling back from the light, clearing a narrow path along the wall. She squeezed past, the pulsating heat of the thing pressing in on her, its foul stench filling her lungs. The air grew hotter, the thrumming louder as she ventured deeper into the tunnels that serviced the main bore. The maintenance tunnels were a place of primordial dread. The air was thick and heavy, tasting of rust and stagnant water. Beneath it all, a sharp scent of ozone, a telltale sign of arcing electricity, hinted at stressed electrical relays somewhere in the deep dark. These tunnels spiraled down, following the path of the main drill, leading to the very edge of the mantle tap itself. Down here, the rhythmic throb was no longer a vibration. It was a physical force, a concussion that pulsed through her entire body. The walls of the tunnel were no longer clean steel. They were coated in the same organic tissue, thicker and more complex. Veins the size of her arm pulsed with a faint, reddish bioluminescent light, and the rock itself seemed to be fused with living flesh. She wasn't in a power plant anymore. She was inside a living creature. She found what she was looking for. The figure of another engineer, Liam, who had vanished during a routine inspection 6 months ago. His form was grotesquely fused into the wall, his face a silent rictus of horror. The company logo on his tattered uniform barely visible. His diagnostic kit lay beside him, partially absorbed into the fleshy floor. He hadn't just died. He had been assimilated. A low, wet sound from behind made her spin around. A tendril, thick as a fire hose, uncoiled from the ceiling. Its tip a glistening barbed sphincter that opened and closed hungrily. It lashed out and she dodged, the barb scraping against the metal wall with a sound of screeching nails. Another joined it, then a third, snaking from the walls and floor. The tunnel was an esophagus, and it was trying to swallow her. She ran, the beam of her flashlight bouncing wildly off the pulsating organic walls. The tendrils were fast, striking at her from all directions. One wrapped around her ankle, its surface rough and cold. She let out a choked vocalization and brought the heavy pipe down on it. It didn't sever it, but the thing recoiled, its flesh sizzling as if burned. The impact sent a shudder through the entire tunnel. She had heard it. The valve was just ahead. A large red wheel set into a complex array of machinery, now partially overgrown with the creature's flesh. As she reached it, a massive tendril slammed down from above, blocking her path. It was thicker than the others, its surface covered in what looked like primitive eyes that all swiveled to focus on her. At its base, half submerged in the fleshy floor, was another figure. The man from the security photo in the control room. The one who had built the plant. Its first victim. His face was a mask of agony, his mouth open in a silent vocalization. This was its heart. Its control center, Dodiac core integrity at 20%. The automated voice blared from a nearby speaker, distorted by the growth. Catastrophic failure in 90 seconds. Ilara knew what she had to do. Releasing the pressure would only feed it faster. She had to neutralize the source. Not the plant. The creature. She ignored the manual override. Instead, she looked at the primary energy conduit that snaked past the valve. the main artery carrying the full explosive power of the geothermal core directly to the turbines. Directly to the creature, an idea, born of pure suicidal desperation, took hold. With a final desperate vocalization, she swung the heavy pipe not at the tendril, but at the structural joint of the conduit itself. The first blow dented the thick metal. The second caused a high-pitched whine to fill the air. The tendril struck, catching her in the shoulder, throwing her against the wall. The pain was immense, but she scrambled back to her feet, her vision tunneling. 60 seconds to core breach, War, the voice droned. She swung again. A hairline fracture appeared. Superheated steam, hotter than molten lava, hissed out. The tendrils recoiled, the alien flesh blistering and peeling away from the intense heat. She raised the pipe one last time. "This is for Liam," she grunted, and brought it down with every ounce of strength she had left. The conduit ruptured. It was not an explosion of fire, but of pure energy. A torrent of incandescent plasma and steam. A directed star blast erupted from the pipe. It didn't just strike the central tendril, it vaporized it. The wave of energy tore through the tunnel, flash cooking the organic mass, turning it to blackened, brittle charcoal. The deep planetary thrumming stopped, replaced by a final, deafening vocalization of agony that seemed to shake the world. The back pressure from the blast hurled Ilara back down the tunnel, her body a ragdoll in a hurricane of steam and force. Her last conscious thought was of the alarms on her console going silent one by one, as the heart of the Hephaestus plant tore itself apart to neutralize the ancient god it had woken. Kale could only watch in horror as every monitor for the Hephaestus plant flatlined. One moment, there was a pressure spike that shattered every known scale. A vertical line of red that went off the chart. The next, there was only static. Silence. The link to the deepest parts of the earth had been severed. The plant was gone. Ilara was gone. For weeks, the area was a quarantine zone. Seismic activity, unlike anything ever recorded, shook the region before finally, blessedly, falling silent. When the recovery teams were finally able to drill a new exploratory shaft down, they found nothing. No plant. No machinery. No creature. Not even a figure. They found a new, impossibly vast cavern where the plant used to be, its walls smooth and vitrified, as if scoured by an atomic fire. And at the very bottom, fused into the glassy floor, they found a single object. A battered, heavy-duty flashlight, its lens shattered, but its power cells still impossibly, holding a faint charge. The official report cited a catastrophic, unforeseen geological event, a mantle plume that had annihilated the multi-trillion-dollar facility in seconds. But the recovery team lead filed a confidential addendum. He noted the strange, almost organic fractal patterns in the vitrified rock, and the chemical composition of the dark residue that coated everything, which contained complex amino acids that matched no known life on Earth. And he noted one last thing. The faint, rhythmic energy signature the deep-range survey equipment still picked up, emanating from a point miles below the cavern floor. A pattern that looked, for all the world, like a slow, deep heartbeat, repeating on a 7.2-second cycle. Waiting. The specimen they called us the janitors. It was a cute, corporate-approved nickname that sanitized the reality of our work. We were the cleanup crew for incidents that officially never happened. Corporate espionage that ended in shootouts, failed experiments that painted labs in colors not found in nature, black site containment failures. If it was messy and deniable, we got the call. Our motto was simple: we make it go away. The job that broke me started like any other. 22:30 hours, a late-night call, a set of encrypted coordinates pushed to our hardened terminals, and a sterile white van ride into the middle of nowhere. This time it was a private research facility, a sleek modern building nestled in a dark forest miles from the nearest town. The official report, or what passed for one, was brief. Catastrophic equipment malfunction. Full biological and chemical containment protocol required. Site designation, Omnigen Northwoods facility. My team lead Mike, a man whose face was a permanent roadmap of cynical disapproval, gave us the pre-entry briefing in the back of the van. All right, listen up. This is a Tier 4 cleanup. That means Draeger model fully sealed suits, no exceptions. Independent oxygen, closed-loop rebreathers, the works. Comms on encrypted channel 3. Comms check, Martinez? A check dot, Davis? A check dot, here, Alex? A check, too, Mike nodded. The client is a biotech firm called Omnigen. They were working on something. They're not saying what. Power is out, we're on backup generators, so expect intermittent lighting. Our insertion point is the main lab, floor 0. Goal is simple. Sterilize everything. Bag anything identifiable for level 2 processing and leave the place looking like a brand new office space. Questions? Silence. We never had questions. Questions got you noticed, and in our line of work, being noticed was a career-ending move. We suited up. The practice sequence of movements second nature. The click and hiss of our respirators engaging was the only sound in the sterile confines of the truck. The suits were heavy, cumbersome, and smelled faintly of recycled air and antiseptic. As the rear doors opened at 23:05, the cold night air hit us carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. It felt like the last clean breath I'd ever take. The entrance to the lab was a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles without markings were parked haphazardly, their engines cold. Men in dark suits with earpieces watched us with blank, emotionless eyes. They were the client's weird oversight of there to ensure we did our job and only our job. They didn't acknowledge us. We were just part of the equipment. One of them waved us through a security door that had been pried open, its magnetic lock fused and smoking slightly, the metal around it warped. The first thing that hit me inside wasn't a smell, but a sound. A low, pervasive hum that vibrated through the soles of my boots and resonated in my chest cavity. The air hummed with the residual energy of whatever catastrophe had occurred, and I could taste the faint metallic tang of ozone, a byproduct of the high-energy equipment that had recently been active. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across stainless steel tables and shattered glassware. Our job wasn't to ask questions. It was to sterilize, catalog, and erase. The main lab was a disaster zone. Papers were scattered everywhere, looking like a flock of birds had exploded mid-flight. Computer monitors were smashed, keyboards shattered. In the center of the room, a large cylindrical containment unit was shattered, thick plexiglass blown outwards with incredible force. Pools of dark residue glistened on the floor, iridescent and shimmering under our helmet lights. The sight of it triggered our training instantly. The sharp cutting scent of peracetic acid from our portable foggers began to permeate the lab, an acrid counterpoint to the ozone. Martinez. Samples. Take multiple cores from the residue pools. Davis, start on documentation. Tag every item, photograph from 3 angles, upload to the truck server. Mike's voice crackled in my ear, crisp and professional. Alex, you're with me. We start with the primary contamination zone and establish a clean corridor. That meant the area around the broken tank. As we approached, the hum grew louder, the vibrations more intense. My Geiger counter, a standard piece of our kit, remained silent. No radiation. My chemical sniffer was also quiet. No airborne toxins registered above baseline. Whatever this was, it was outside our usual parameters. This was not a standard chemical or biological event. We got to work, our movements practiced and efficient. We used HA9 reactive foam to soak up the dark residue, a substance that was thick and gelatinous, almost like crude oil but with a strange hypnotic violet shimmer. It clung to the foam applicators, refusing to drip. We documented, we bagged, we sterilized every square centimeter of surface. It was just another job in a long line of them. Then I found the first figure, at 3:47 hours. Tucked away under a workstation, it was a scientist in a torn lab coat. There was no obvious cause of death. No wounds, no signs of a struggle. His face was frozen in an expression of pure, unadulterated terror, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent vocalization. The oddest part was the complete lack of dark residue and gore. He was pristine. My suit's integrated biosensor suite registered 0 elevation in microbial or viral agents. Clinically, he was perfect. Just stopped. Mike, update for the log. Code 1099 Sector Gamma. Time is 23:47, I reported, my voice flat. Acknowledged. Catalog as Biocasualty 1. Leave it for the B team, as he replied, his tone as unconcerned as if I'd found a dropped pen. The B team was another cute name, this one for the figure baggers who would follow us. We kept working, the hum a constant, unnerving companion. We found 2 more scientists, both in the same condition. No visible trauma, just faces locked in a rictus of ultimate fear. It was unnerving. Our work usually involved cleaning up the very visible, very messy consequences of violence. This was a clean, too clean. The procedural neatness of the scene was more terrifying than any gore. My assigned section was a smaller, isolated lab off the main chamber. The door was sealed, the electronic lock dead, its indicator light dark. The manual override was sheared off. It took me a few minutes with a plasma cutter to burn through the lock mechanism and pry it open. The air inside was colder, the hum more intense. This room was the source. In the center was a smaller version of the containment tank from the main lab, this one intact. The tank itself was a model I didn't recognize, likely a custom OmniGen build. Leads for EEG, ECG, and what looked like a quantum state monitor snaked from the top, all terminating in a fried console. Error messages were burned into the dead screen. Cascade failure, Q-state unbound, terminate. Inside, floating in a faintly glowing amber fluid, was the specimen. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It was a knot of biological tissue, constantly, slowly, horrifyingly reconfiguring itself. One moment it was a cluster of crystalline structures, the next a mass of pulsing veined flesh. Then it would sprout something that looked disturbingly like a human hand, fingers flexing before melting back into the amorphous whole. It was beautiful and repulsive, a living, breathing paradox. I stared, mesmerized. My training, my professionalism evaporated. I was just a man in a plastic suit staring at an impossibility. The hum was coming from the tank, a soft, almost melodic thrum that resonated deep in my chest. The glowing amber fluid swirled, and the thing inside seemed to turn towards me. It had no eyes, no face, but I felt it see me. That's when I noticed the notes. Taped to the side of the tank was a series of frantic handwritten observations. Day 1. Subject designated chrysalis. Responds to electrical stimuli. Cellular structure is unlike any known biology. It appears to be. Learning born Day 5. Chrysalis has begun to mimic shapes. Showed it a picture of a mouse. It formed a perfect, albeit temporary, replica. Fascinating and terrifying. Dr. Eerie is concerned about the energy readings. With Day 12. It's communicating. Not with sound, with thoughts, images. I saw my childhood home. I saw my deceased wife. It projects what we want to see. Or what we fear. On Day 19, it's hungry. The nutrient solution is depleting at an exponential rate. It's projecting images of suffering, of pain. It wants something more. We can't open the tank. Eerie was right. We should have neutralized it. The last entry was barely legible, the penmanship a wild scrawl. He did got out. Not the subject. Its influence. It showed us the end. All of us, we saw it. Oh God, we saw it. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over me. The scientists, they weren't attacked. They were shown something. Something so terrifying it simply stopped their hearts. The hum from the tank intensified and a soft feminine voice echoed in my helmet. A voice that was not coming through my radio. "Let me out, Alex." I stumbled back, tripping over a discarded stool. My heart hammered against my ribs. My suit's vitals monitor probably lit up like a Christmas tree. It knew my name. "I can show you such wonderful things," the voice purred, sweet and intoxicating. An image flashed in my mind. Me on a tropical beach, a beautiful woman by my side, the taste of salt and sunshine on my lips. It was a memory I didn't have, a life I'd never lived. But it felt more real than the cold. Sterile lab around me. "No," I whispered, the word swallowed by my respirator. The image shattered, replaced by another. My mother, years younger, smiling at me from her hospital bed, healthy and vibrant, not the withered shell I remembered. "She doesn't have to be gone, Alex." A child's voice, my voice, whispered in my head. Tears streamed down my face, fogging my visor. My own breath hitched. The suit's CO2 scrubbers working overtime to compensate for my hyperventilation. This was its object. Not physical force, but psychological warfare of the highest order. It found your cracks, your regrets, your deepest desires, and it pried them open. "What are you?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. The hum softened. The shape in the tank coalesced for a brief, sickening moment into a perfect replica of the dead scientist from the main lab. Its new mouth opened, and the man's own voice, distorted and electronic, came through my comms. "We are salvation." I fumbled for my radio, my hand shaking. "Mike, this is Alex. Protocol requires immediate supervisor verification for a Class 4 bioanomaly." "What are you talking about, Alex?" Mike's voice was sharp, annoyed. "What's a Class 4? Stick to the protocols we know." What's your status? Before I could answer, the voice was back in my head, no longer seductive but cold and commanding. And he can't help you. An image flooded my senses. Mike, in the main lab, suddenly freezing, his hand going to his chest. The same look of absolute horror I'd seen on the dead man's figure spreading across his face before he crumpled to the floor. "Mike," I yelled into the radio. "Smike." A burst of static, a high-pitched whine, then the flat, dead tone of a severed connection. The hum in the lab stopped. Complete, unnerving silence. Then a soft, delicate tink sound. I looked at the containment tank. A hairline crack had appeared in the glass. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. All my training, all my detached professionalism was a joke in the face of this. This wasn't a chemical spill or a radiation leak. This was something ancient and utterly alien. Another tink. The crack spread, branching out like a spider's web. The amber fluid began to seep out, sizzling as it hit the cold tile floor. The voice was back, a chorus of 1,000 whispers in my mind. "We are free." I didn't think. I ran. I scrambled out of the small lab, slamming the damaged door shut behind me. Not that it would do any good. The main lab was empty. My teammates Martinez and Davis were gone. Their equipment lay abandoned on the floor, a fogger still hissing uselessly. I didn't need to look for them. I knew what I would find. My only thought was escape. I sprinted through the darkened corridors, a new sound joining me. A wailing klaxon, the facility's final, belated alarm. The emergency lights strobed erratically, seeming to mock me with their stuttering life. The men in suits were gone from the entrance. The unmarked vehicles were gone. There was just the oppressive silence of the forest and the open, gaping maw of the lab behind me. I reached our van, tore at the seals of my helmet with shaking hands. The hiss of decompression was deafening. I ripped it off and breathed in the clean, cold night air, gagging. I didn't stop. I jumped into the driver's seat, fumbled the keys into the ignition, and peeled out of there, gravel spraying from the tires. I drove for an hour, my mind a blur of terror and disbelief before I dared to look in the rearview mirror. The facility was just a faint glow against the horizon. But as I watched, the glow intensified, pulsing once, twice, before erupting in a silent, brilliant flash of violet light that illuminated the entire sky. Then darkness. I never went back. I abandoned the van at a truck stop 2 states away, the suit still in the back. I walked until I hit a highway and hitched a ride. I disappeared. I work as a janitor now, for real, in a small-town high school. The pay is terrible. The work is boring, but it's blissfully normal. I scrub graffiti that reads Class of 24 Rules and feel a profound sense of peace. I mop up spilled soda, and it's the most beautiful, mundane, dark residue I have ever seen. But some nights, when the school is empty and the only sound is the buffer whining across the linoleum, I hear it. A low, soft hum, just on the edge of my hearing. And sometimes, in the reflection of a freshly waxed floor, I see a flicker of movement, a shape that is not my own. A constant, unblinking presence. It didn't neutralize all of them. It let one go. It let me go. It wanted a witness. Or maybe it just wanted a janitor. A familiar face for when it finishes its redecorating and needs someone to clean up. Because I know with a certainty that chills me to my very soul that it's not done. It's just getting started. And there is nowhere I can run where it won't eventually find me. The Mariana Submersible Incident, L-Log Start, 210513, UTC, Pilot, J. Harrison, SAR Deep Sea Division, Vehicle, DSV Rescuer. 7. Mission, Locate DSV Charon. Last ping received 72 hours prior. The formal name of the mission was Search and Recovery Operation 31B. For me, it was just another Tuesday. I'm a deep-sea search and rescue operator, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the guy they call when one of those billion-dollar tin cans springs a leak at the bottom of the world. I've retrieved geological survey teams from collapsed hydrothermal vents and pulled pilots from submersibles crippled by undersea landslides. Darkness is my office. The crushing pressure outside my viewport is just another coworker. But this one was different from the very start. The DSV Charon, a state-of-the-art research submersible running a deep trench xenobiology survey, had vanished in the Mariana Trench. Not a distress call, not a system failure report. It just stopped talking. Went from a solid green light on the tracking board to a ghost in the machine. 72 hours of absolute silence. Log update, 22-1403 UTC. Hull integrity at 99.8%. External pressure nominal at 81 megapascals. Descending through 8,000 meters. The abyssal plain unfolds below. A landscape of eternal midnight unseen by any surface light. The water outside the reinforced quartz of my viewport was a perfect, featureless black. A void so complete it felt like it was trying to erase the very concept of light. My sub, the Rescuer 7, was a tough little beast. A compact Class 3 recovery vehicle designed for the sole purpose of reaching places where things had gone catastrophically wrong. The low, constant hum of the CO2 scrubbers was my only companion. A sound I'd come to associate with the metallic taste of recycled air and the faint, sharp smell of ozone from stressed electronics that always seemed to hang in the cockpit on deep dives. The hull would occasionally emit a low groan, a percussive pop of metal contracting under the immense strain. A sound that would send a rookie into a panic, but was just part of the symphony to me. Surface Command was a voice in my ear, a team of anxious professionals thousands of meters above me, but down here, I was utterly, profoundly alone. Rescuer 7, this is Surface. Report status. The voice, calm and measured, crackled through the comms, distorted slightly by the distance and the water itself. Surface, this is 7. Depth is 9,600 meters. All systems are green. Environmentals are stable. Entering the target search grid now. Activating forward sonar array. I flicked a switch on my console, feeling the familiar click under my glove. The world outside my viewport was replaced by a digital topographical map of the seafloor, rendered in shifting greens and blues. The sonar began its methodical sweep, pinging out into the abyss, listening for the faintest echo of a 40-foot metal tube that had no business being lost. The pings were slow. The time for the sound to travel out and back at this depth was agonizingly long. Hours bled into one another. A long, monotonous stretch of concentration. The only markers of time were the timestamps on my logs and the slow depletion of my primary oxygen tank. The trench floor was a brutal, alien landscape of jagged rock formations and fine, pale silt that billowed like spectral smoke as my thrusters passed over it. Log update, 014550 UTC. Passing 10,500 meters. The pressure is immense. A physical presence you can almost feel pressing in on the hull from all directions. The Rescuer 7 groaned softly. A familiar song of titanium alloy adjusting to a strain that would pulverize lesser materials into powder. Anything on Sonar 7? Surface asked, their voice betraying a hint of the same fatigue I felt. Negative, Surface. The grid is chaotic. Lots of geological interference. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack made of needles, picking up multiple false returns from what looks like basalt outcroppings. My eyes were burning from staring at the screen, tracing the slow sweep of the sonar line. I was about to report another empty quadrant when a blip appeared. Faint but distinct, a regular man-made shape against the jagged organic chaos of the trench. My heart rate ticked up a notch, a physiological response I'd trained myself to control with measured breathing. Emotion is a liability at this depth. Focus is survival. Surface, I have a possible contact, bearing 09 or 5. It's faint, but the geometry is right. Consistent, non-geological profile. Confirmed 7, we see the mark on your telemetry. Proceed with caution. Approach vector plotted. I adjusted my thrusters with practiced gentleness, the sub responding with a gentle shudder as it changed course. The green wireframe on my screen grew larger, more defined with each ping. It was her, the DSV Karen. She was resting on a bizarrely flat ledge of rock, looking almost like she'd been parked there deliberately. A needle found in the haystack. There were no signs of a catastrophic hull breach. No debris field, no visible damage from my current distance. That was the first red flag. Submersibles don't just land softly when they fail. They implode. They crumple. They don't settle peacefully. Surface, I have visual, I reported, my voice a low monotone, forcing the professionalism back into it. Visual contact confirms DSV Karen. Signs of catastrophic hull breach are negative, but Life support telemetry is offline. Protocol was violated at 0347 according to their last ping. Copy that, 7. Any signs of life? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken hope. I brought the Rescuer 7 closer, my powerful external floodlights cutting 2 brilliant cones through the primeval dark, illuminating the Karen's hull. The name was stenciled on the side in stark white letters, eerily clean. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Negative surface. No lights, internal or external. Power appears to be completely offline. I'm going to attempt to get a look inside the main viewport. I maneuvered my sub with millimeter precision until my cockpit viewport was just feet from one of the Karen's main observation windows. My lights flooded the interior. The scene inside was frozen, a silent, motionless tableau of abandoned work. A tablet was floating in the still water of the cabin, tethered to its console by a charging cable, its screen dark. Research papers were suspended in mid-drift, scattered like fallen leaves in a windless forest. But there were no people. The 3-man crew was gone. Surface, the cockpit is empty. I repeat, the crew is not here. The interior is pristine. No signs of a struggle, no emergency measures deployed. I paused, my eyes scanning the vacant chairs, the dead instrument panels. Wait a minute. My blood ran cold. On the floor of the cockpit, stark against the pale metal deck plating, I could see dark stains. Smears and droplets arranged in a pattern that spoke of something being dragged. Not red, black, a thick, oily, dark residue. Rescuer 7, what is it? Surface prompted, their tone sharpening. I see. Some kind of dark residue on the deck plates. It's concentrated near the rear airlock hatch. The pattern is inconsistent with a simple fluid leak. My mind raced. An explosive decompression from the airlock? A chemical leak from a sample container? Nothing made sense. I decided to do a full external survey. My mission was to assess viability for recovery, and I would do it by the book. Using the Rescuer 7's manipulator arms, I was a surgeon examining a patient. I ran my cameras along every inch of the Karen's hull. Surface commencing external inspection protocol, I stated. Aft thruster assembly appears undamaged. No signs of impact. Portside sample collection bays are stowed and locked. Starboard sensor suite is intact. Everything was in order. The hull was intact. The thrusters were undamaged. It was as if the crew had simply evaporated. Then I moved the camera to the small external access hatch for the dive suits, located near the sub's belly. It was slightly ajar. A gap of no more than 3 inches. That was impossible. It could only be opened from the inside, and required a complex multi-step depressurization sequence that took 15 minutes. Opening it at this depth for any reason would be instant explosive death. Surface, the external suit hatch is open. Just a crack, but it's open. That's not possible. I am cross-referencing schematics, but this violates every safety interlock. Confirm 7. We register the anomaly. Can you get a visual inside the suit locker? Affirmative. I nudged my sub closer and angled one of my grapple-mounted cameras towards the gap. The camera's tiny but powerful LED light pierced the darkness within. The suit locker was designed to hold 3 deep-dive atmospheric suits. 2 of the racks were empty. The third had a suit on it. But something was wrong. Bug update 031022 UTC. External camera feed is live, focusing on interior of Karen's suit locker. The suit was a standard-issue Hadal-class exploration suit, a bulky armored thing that looked more like a personal submarine than a piece of clothing. But the person inside it, they weren't moving. They were just standing there, facing away from the camera, towards the back of the locker, perfectly still. I see one of the crew, I said, my voice tight, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. He's in his suit. He's not moving. Any vital signs on the suit's telemetry? Negative. The suit's comms and biometrics are dark, same as the sub itself. I zoomed the small camera in. The suit was pristine, no damage, but the posture was wrong. Too rigid, unnaturally stiff like a mannequin. Surface, I'm going to try and get a better angle. See if I can get a look at the faceplate. I carefully maneuvered the camera arm, pushing the lens further into the narrow opening. The beam of light played over the back of the large white helmet, then crept around the side. My breath hitched in my chest. The faceplate wasn't transparent. It was black, opaque, not cracked or frosted, but filled with a swirling, viscous darkness that seemed to absorb the light from my camera. A miniature vortex of night. Surface. There's something wrong with the helmet. The visor is blacked out. I can't see inside. A cold dread, heavy and physical, began to settle in my gut. This wasn't a rescue anymore. It was something else entirely. Suddenly, the head of the suited figure twitched. It was a small, jerky movement, like a malfunctioning animatronic. A mechanical, inorganic shudder. Surface, did you see that? I have movement. We saw it, 7, is the crew member responsive. Before I could answer, the head began to turn. Slowly, impossibly. It turned 180 degrees on the neck ring, a feat the suit's design should not have allowed under any circumstance. It kept turning, the sound of grinding metal and screeching bearings faintly audible through my sub's external hydrophones. The black faceplate was now directly facing my camera. And then, a high-pitched shriek of static and electronic noise burst through my comms, so loud and piercing I ripped my headset off with a yell. A full-spectrum electronic vocalization, deafening and agonizing. "Ah!" I yelled, clutching my ears as the main cabin lights of the Rescuer 7 flickered and died for a second before the backup system kicked in. The shriek stopped as abruptly as it began. The cockpit was silent again, save for the hum of my life support and the new frantic thumping of my heart. Rescuer 7, report. What was that noise? Are you all right?
We registered a massive EM spike.
I put my headset back on, my hands shaking uncontrollably now. I'm fine. A massive EM burst. It came from the suit. I stared at the camera feed on my monitor. The black faceplate was still pointed at me. And then, from behind the opaque visor, 2 points of faint red light ignited like distant malevolent stars. They weren't lights from the suit's interior display. They were inside whatever was in the suit. The figure raised its arm, the movement no longer jerky but smooth and deliberate, and it knocked my camera away with impossible speed. The feed went to static. Surface. The figure is active. It's hostile. I was already backing the Rescuer 7 away from the Karen, my training screaming at me to create distance to reassess. Rescuer 7, repeat. What is its status? Its status is it's not the crew. It's something else. As my floodlights pulled back, they illuminated a larger scene. Through the Karen's main viewport, I saw movement. 2 more figures, both in identical dive suits with the same blacked-out visors, were now visible. They had not been there seconds before. They were standing in the cockpit, their heads turning in perfect, terrifying unison to track my sub. 2 more pairs of red lights blinked on in the darkness within. They were inside, and one was outside. A heavy, percussive thud vibrated through my entire hull, so powerful it shook loose a panel cover from the ceiling, which clattered to the deck. They were on my sub. It's on my hull. I shouted into the comms, my professional calm completely shattered. Something is outside. I swiveled the external cameras, my fingers fumbling with the controls. There, clinging to the top of my sub with magnetic boots, was the figure from the Karen. It was holding a long, jagged piece of metal, a piece of geological survey equipment repurposed as a crude object. It raised the object high over its helmet. A deafening bang echoed through the cockpit as it struck the hull right above my head. The lights flickered violently. A new warning siren began to blare, shrill and insistent. Warning, hull stress at 110%. Microfractures detected. Section B7. Rescuer 7, evasive maneuvers. Get out of there now. Authorization for emergency ascent is granted. I slammed the vertical thrusters to maximum. The sub lurched upwards, shaking violently, but the figure clung on, its magnetic boots locked to the hull. Another bang, louder this time. A spray of sparks erupted from a conduit overhead, sizzling and dying in the cool air. My eyes darted to the manipulator arm controls. The grapple was still active. With a desperate snarl, I swiveled the heavy robotic arm up and over the cockpit. The figure turned its black faceplate towards the approaching claw, the red eyes burning with cold, analytical intelligence. It sidestepped the first clumsy swing, its movements unnervingly fluid and fast for something in a cumbersome pressure suit. It raised its object again. I knew with sickening certainty that if it struck the viewport, I was finished. The pressure would crush my sub, and me, into a ball of scrap metal in less than a millisecond. I swung the arm again, this time not aiming for the figure, but for its magnetic boots. The heavy claw smashed into its ankle with a sickening crunch of composite materials and a flash of discharging energy. There was a shower of sparks and the figure lost its footing, its magnetic lock broken. It slid across the curved top of my sub, its own metal fingers screeching against my hull. a sound like 1,000 nails on a blackboard that I could feel in my teeth, trying to find a handhold. For a moment it dangled from the edge of the sub, one hand gripping a sensor probe with impossible strength. Its other hand still held the metal object. The two red lights of its faceplate were fixed on me through the viewport. An unblinking, hateful stare from the bottom of the world. Then its grip failed. It fell away, tumbling slowly into the crushing, absolute blackness below, disappearing from the beams of my lights as if swallowed by the void itself. I didn't wait. I initiated the full emergency ascent protocol. The ballast tanks blew with a deafening roar and the sub shot upwards, a homesick cork rocketing towards the surface. I monitored damage reports flashing across my screen, fighting to keep the ascent stable. I didn't look back at the Karen. I didn't want to see the two other figures watching me go. I didn't want to wonder if they could somehow follow. I broke the surface 3 hours later, the sub's alarm still screaming. The recovery crew said I was in shock, that my hands had to be pried from the controls. They kept asking me what I saw down there during the debriefing. I told them the crew was gone and the submersible was compromised. I didn't mention the figures. I didn't mention the red lights or the impossible way they moved. Who would believe me? They would have said I was suffering from high-pressure nervous syndrome. Hallucinations brought on by the depth in nitrogen. I filed my report. DSV Karen located, hull intact, crew missing, presumed dead from an unknown atmospheric or biological agent. The dark residue was classified as an BTR unidentified microbial contaminant. The vocalization was logged as an BTR's extreme localized electromagnetic event of unknown origin. The mission was closed. They declared the Mariana Trench a permanent exclusion zone, citing Radar's unpredictable seismic and geological instability. A cover story, but I know the truth. I know what's down there wearing the faces or at least the suits of the Karen's crew. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I can still hear that shriek of static in my memory, feel the phantom vibration of it in my bones, and I see those two red lights burning in the endless dark. I don't do deep-sea rescues anymore. I transferred to surface operations, because I know that some things once lost should never be found, and some places are dark for a reason. There are things in the abyss that are older than mankind, and they do not like to be disturbed. They are patient. They can wait. But now they know we're here. We rang the doorbell to their home at the bottom of the world, and something answered. Something that we can't hope to neutralize. The mimic of Windy Peak log entry. Ranger Matt Riley, Unit 7. Date, October 26th. Time, 12:45. Proceeding up Windy Peak Access Road for a welfare check on meteorologist David Miller. No contact for 48 hours, a significant deviation from protocol. The drive up to Windy Peak was always a lonely one, but today it felt different. It felt ominous. For 2 days there had been nothing but radio silence from David, the man who manned the remote weather station nestled high in the alpine zone of the park. My job as a park ranger was usually about lost hikers and bear sightings, maybe some geological survey assistance. This was irregular. David was meticulous to a fault. He logged his check-ins at 08:00 and 14:30 daily, without fail, a routine as predictable as the sunrise. His reports were precise, his observations detailed. 24 hours of silence was a flag under SOP 4.2b. 48 hours triggered an automatic mandatory welfare check. So here I was, my beat-up Park Service truck grinding up the gravel access road, the gears complaining in the thin air. The tall ancient pines closed in around me, their branches heavy with early snow forming a suffocating tunnel. The air grew colder, each 100 feet of elevation a noticeable drop in temperature. Radio reception, usually clear until the ridgeline, became spotty, then died altogether, replaced by a low, persistent static that seemed to hum with a malevolent energy. Windy Peak Station. This is Ranger Unit 7, come in, David. Over, I said into the mic for the 10th time in as many minutes, reciting the call as a procedural matter, knowing it was useless. Only a wall of static answered, thick and impenetrable. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I am now entering radio shadow. Proceeding with on-site investigation. Will report back upon return to viable signal range, over. The static was my only confirmation. The weather station came into view as I rounded the final jarring switchback. It was a stark, functional building. a concrete and steel bunker designed to withstand 200-mile-per-hour winds and crushing snow loads, an outpost of science at the edge of the world. But something was immediately fundamentally wrong. The main communications array, a Mark IV meteorological relay dish, was tilted at an impossible, sickening angle, pointing directly at the frozen ground as if in supplication. A thick armored coaxial cable that normally snaked from the dish to the building's primary junction box was severed, its cleanly sliced ends swinging limply in the biting wind. That cable was rated to withstand direct lightning strikes. I parked the truck, the engine ticking as it cooled in the frigid air. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and my service-issued multi-tool, its weight a small comfort in my gloved hand. The quiet here was different from the usual mountain silence. It was an absolute void, broken only by the high, thin whistle of the wind through the rocks and the rhythmic creak of the damaged satellite dish assembly groaning under its own weight. There were no bird calls, no chattering of squirrels or marmots. The unsettling silence of a space that wildlife had unanimously decided to abandon. The only other sound was the intermittent, sharp ping of ice crystals striking the station's aluminum siding. The door to the main station was ajar, swinging softly, rhythmically, in the wind. A heavy-duty, pressure-sealed steel door, designed to be dog-latched from the inside against hurricane-force gales, should not be ajar. My heart rate elevated, a frantic drumming against my ribs that I could feel in my ears. I drew my service object, the cold polymer of the grip feeling alien and heavier than usual. "David?" I called out, my voice sounding frail and insignificant against the vast, indifferent emptiness.
David, it's Matt.
"Ranger Riley, you in there?" No answer. Only the mocking whine of the wind. I pushed the door open wider, its hinges protesting, and stepped across the threshold into the gloom. Inside the main monitoring room was a portrait of chaos. Reams of chart paper were strewn across the floor like fallen leaves. A heavy office chair was overturned, and one of the large, central monitors displaying Doppler patterns was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures radiating from a single blunt point of impact. The air was thick with the sharp metallic tang of ozone from a fried relay box in the corner, a smell that scraped the back of my throat. But it was the trail leading from the epicenter of the mess to a back corridor that made my stomach clench into a cold, hard knot. A dark, smeared trail of dark residue, viscous and black, that ended at a half-open door. My hand tightened on my service object. I followed the trail, my insulated boots crunching on scattered papers and shattered plastic. The door led to the small Spartan living quarters. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I used my foot to push it fully open. David was there, or what was left of him. He was a figure slumped against the far wall, his body contorted in a position of agony that was fundamentally, anatomically wrong. His eyes were wide open, locked in a gaze of ultimate mind-shattering terror, staring at something just past my shoulder that I couldn't see. A large pool of dark residue had collected on the sealed concrete floor beneath him, and his standard-issue uniform was soaked and matted with it. The method used to neutralize him was brutally obvious. His throat had been massively lacerated. On the wall behind his head, a single looping word was scrawled in what I knew with sickening certainty was his own dark residue. "Listen." I stumbled back, a wave of nausea washing over me as bile rose in my throat. My training kicked in, a thin veneer of professionalism over a core of pure panic. I fumbled for my radio, my hands shaking so badly from adrenaline and cold that I almost dropped it. I had to get back to the truck. The station's comms were clearly destroyed. "Dispatch, this is Matt at Windy Peak. I have a situation. Asset at Windy Peak is compromised. Code Black is declared. Protocol 7 Delta. Ranger Miller is unresponsive. Confirmed casualty." The voice of the dispatcher, Sarah, was calm, professional, but laced with an undercurrent of concern. "Matt, stay calm. Acknowledge Code Black. Please clarify casualty." Before I could formulate a response to describe the horror in this room, a new sound cut through the radio's static. A voice. It was David's voice. "Matt, is that you?" Thank God, I thought I was a goner. I froze, every muscle in my body locking tight. My blood turned to ice water. It was impossible. I was looking right at David's figure. The disconnect was so profound, my brain simply refused to process it. "Matt, buddy, are you there?" The voice from my radio continued perfectly, flawlessly mimicking David's friendly, slightly reedy tone. Something attacked the station, some animal, maybe a bear. It went crazy. Broke the comms array. I've been holed up in the maintenance tunnels. It's still here, I think. You need to come get me. The entrance is in the main generator room. Dispatch, who is this? I whispered into my mic. My eyes locked on the lifeless figure against the wall. Verify identity. I need an authentication. Matt, it's me, David. The voice insisted, a note of desperate panic entering its perfect inflection. Don't listen to dispatch. The signal must be corrupted by the damaged array. You have to trust me. It's trying to trick you somehow. I'm in the generator room. Damn it, hurry. Matt, what's going on? Dispatch's voice crackled, heavily distorted now. We're getting conflicting signals on this channel. What is your status? Authentication required. I didn't know what to believe. My eyes told me David was dead. But my ears, the voice was so perfect. The fear, the inflection, the little ticks of his speech. It was him. Could I have been mistaken? Could the figure be someone or something else entirely dressed in his clothes? Then in the dim light I saw it. On the floor just beside David's outstretched hand was his personal data assistant, its armored screen shattered but still faintly glowing. I crept forward, my heart a jackhammer in my chest, my service object extended. On the screen was the last file he had accessed, an audio log. My finger, trembling, found the play icon. David's real voice, panicked and breathless, filled the silent, cold room from the tiny speaker. Log entry. Time unknown. It's inside. God, it's inside. It mimics you perfectly, gets you to lower your guard. I saw Sarah, my wife, out on the catwalk, calling to me. But Sarah's in Portland visiting her sister. It wasn't her. It made a sound. A terrible, terrible sound when it realized I knew. I've locked myself in. It's scratching at the door. The metal is screaming. Don't trust the voices, don't... Oh God, it's breaking through. The recording ended with a sickening crunch of bone and a wet, gurgling sound, followed immediately by a high-pitched, inhuman vocalization that made the hairs on my arms stand up on end. A sound composed of clicks and chattering that vibrated through the floor. Matt, please. I'm bleeding pretty bad down here. The voice on the radio pleaded urgently. It's so cold. Just get to the generator room. Please, the generator room. The words scrawled on the wall. Listen. It wasn't a warning to David, it was instructions. For me. The presence wanted me to listen, to follow its voice into a trap. I backed slowly out of the room, my service object trained on the open doorway, expecting something to lunge from the shadows. My mind was racing, piecing it together. The heavy steel door to the outside was ajar when I arrived. It hadn't been David who opened it. He'd been barricaded inside his quarters. The creature had opened it. It had let me in. It had been waiting for me. Okay, David, I said into the radio, my voice trembling but managing to sound steady. I'm on my way. Hang in there. Hurry, Matt, please. I hear it moving around out there. The voice cried, relief flooding its tone. I didn't go to the generator room, I ran. I turned and sprinted, bursting out of the station and into the searing cold, the freezing air burning my lungs. I didn't look back. I threw myself into the driver's seat of my truck, jammed the key in the ignition, and roared the engine to life. Matt, where are you going? The radio shrieked in David's voice, the tone shifting from relief to confusion and then to pure rage. No, come back. You can't leave me. You're leaving me to die. The voice dissolved into that same terrible, inhuman vocalization from the recording, a sound of absolute fury and frustration that blasted from the radio's speaker at full volume. It was a cacophony of clicks, screeches, and static, a sound that bypassed the ear and clawed directly at the brainstem. I slammed the truck into reverse, spun the wheel with a spray of gravel and floored it. The truck fishtailed wildly, the rear bumper clipping a snowbank with a dull thud. But I got it pointed down the mountain. As I careened down the access road, the voice on the radio changed. It became my mother's, her gentle tone a shocking violation in this place. Matthew, honey, why are you driving so fast? You're going to get hurt. Slow down. My hand, shaking violently, slammed the power button on the radio. It was no use. Her voice was now coming from the truck's door speakers, from the air vents, from everywhere at once, disembodied and terrifyingly close. It was inside the truck with me. Don't you ignore me, Matthew. I raised you better than that. Then it was my supervisor, Chief Reynolds, his voice hard with authority. Ranger, you are operating that vehicle in a reckless manner in violation of departmental policy. Pull over immediately. That is a direct order. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white and bloodless. The road was a blur of trees and snow. I had to get to the main park road where there were other people, other rangers, a tangible reality. "So be it," the voice said, and for the first time it didn't mimic anyone. It was a new voice, a cold, flat, synthesized tone, a voice that had never drawn a human breath. "Protocol override. Subject is non-compliant. Lethal measures authorized." The truck's systems began to go haywire. The CAN bus was compromised. The dashboard lights flickered erratically and died. The speedometer and tachometer needles spun wildly before dropping limply to 0. The electronic power steering failed and the wheel kicked back in my hands. I had to fight it with all my strength to keep from careening off the side of the mountain. "You cannot escape," the voice said calmly from the darkness of the cab as the headlights sputtered and went out, plunging me into near-total blackness with a hairpin turn rushing toward me out of the gloom. I wrestled with the wheel, my muscles screaming in protest. I could smell the acrid stench of burning electronics filling the cab. The brakes went soft, the pedal sinking to the floor with no resistance. My passenger side window exploded inwards, showering me with tempered glass. A shape long and impossibly thin, something like an arm but jointed all wrong, whipped into the cab. It was matte black and chitinous, like an insect's leg magnified 100 times, and it moved with sickening, unnatural speed. It lashed out, and I felt a searing electric pain in my shoulder as it tore through my jacket and flesh. I let out a guttural vocalization of pain and swerved hard, the tires screaming on the icy gravel. The truck smashed against the guardrail with a deafening screech of tortured metal. The violent impact threw the arm-like appendage back out the broken window. For a moment there was silence. Then a soft childish giggle filled the cab. It was the voice of a little girl. "Let's play again," it whispered from the passenger seat. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. In the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, I saw it. It was clinging to the back of the truck, its form shifting and indistinct like smoke. It was a fluid mass of shadow and limbs with too many joints and a shape that defied geometry. 2 points of faint red light glowed in the center of the mass like malevolent embers. It was pulling itself onto the roof. I heard the sickening, heavy scrape of its claws on the truck's thin metal skin. I had one chance. Up ahead, the road straightened out for 200 yards before a narrow, aging wooden bridge that spanned a deep gorge. My one remaining headlight flickered back to life, a fragile beam illuminating the path. "You were a good friend, Matt," David's voice said, now soft and sorrowful, seeming to come from right behind my ear. "I'm sorry it has to end this way." A sharp, pointed limb punched through the roof above my head, missing my skull by inches. I didn't slow down. I aimed the truck for the very center of the bridge. The wooden railings were old and rotten. I prayed they wouldn't hold. Just as the truck's front tires hit the rumbling planks of the bridge, I unbuckled, threw my door open, and launched myself out into the freezing night. I hit the gravel hard, pain exploding in my wounded shoulder and ribs. I tumbled, the world a spinning vortex of pain and darkness, and came to a skidding stop in a tangle of thorny bushes at the side of the road. Behind me, there was the thunderous crash of my truck breaking through the railing, the splintering of ancient wood, followed by a long, drawn-out shriek. It wasn't a human sound, and it wasn't the creature's mimicry. It was its real voice, a sound of pure surprise and agony. The shriek was cut short by a final booming impact from far below as the truck hit the bottom of the gorge. Then silence. The only sound was the wind, the high-pitched ringing in my ears, and my own ragged, painful breathing. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, covered in dark residue from my wound and my own sweat, expecting to hear a voice, to see that shadowy form crawl up from the abyss. But there was nothing, only the cold and the quiet. Eventually, painfully, I staggered to my feet. The walk back to the main park road took 6 hours. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind sounded like a familiar whisper. When I finally saw the headlights of a responding ranger's vehicle cutting through the dark, I fell to my knees and wept. They never recovered the truck. The gorge is too deep, the currents of the river at its bottom too strong. They found David's figure, and the official report lists the cause of death as an animal attack, likely a severely aberrant mountain lion. My story was officially logged as a product of head trauma and shock. They made me take a mandatory leave of absence, see a psychiatrist who spoke of stress-induced auditory hallucinations. I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. Sometimes when the phone rings and it's an unlisted number, I hesitate to answer. I'm afraid I'll hear a familiar voice on the other end. A voice that shouldn't be there. A voice asking for help. The thing from Windy Peak is gone, I tell myself. Neutralized. The fall would destroy anything. But as I sit here in the quiet of my home, the silence itself feeling heavy, I can't shake the final word scrawled on the wall in David's dark residue. Listen. And sometimes, in the dead of night, in the liminal state between sleep and wakefulness, I think I can hear it. A faint whisper carried on the wind. A voice I almost recognize calling my name from a great distance. The bridge, it was a bridge like any other, a relic of iron and stone that arched over a dark, listless river. By day it was a forgotten landmark, a shortcut for the few locals who still used it. But at night, under the pale glow of a reluctant moon, Blackwood Bridge became something else entirely. It became our stage. We're professional presence hunters, my partner Dave and I. We run a moderately successful web series, Echoes of the Abyss, where we investigate places tainted by tragedy and fear. Our goal isn't just to capture a shadowy figure on camera. It's to understand the story through data-driven analysis, to map the residual energy left behind. Blackwood Bridge was our latest project, chosen for a local legend about a woman who had met a tragic end on the bridge, a story soaked in betrayal and spilled dark residue. The legend claimed her restless presence still wandered the length of the bridge, searching for the one who betrayed her, an emotional loop we hope to document. Arrival on site. We arrived just as twilight bled into true darkness, the sky a deep, bruised purple. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and the sharp vegetal decay of leaves from the dense woods that flanked the river. The bridge loomed before us, a skeletal silhouette against the fading light. Its silence was profound, a heavy, listening quiet that seemed to absorb all sound, creating a dead zone that felt unnatural. We unloaded our gear, the metallic clicks and plastic snaps of our Pelican cases echoing with jarring clarity in the stillness. There was a palpable weight to this place, an oppressive atmosphere that pressed in from all sides, measurable as a subtle barometric pressure change on our Kestrel weather meter. It felt ancient and it felt angry. Primary setup complete. We established our base of operations at the bridge's entrance, laying out our equipment with practiced efficiency, 3 high-spectrum cameras for overlapping fields of view, a geophone to detect minute vibrations, our primary Tascam DR40 for ambient audio, and parabolic microphones for targeted listening. This was the usual gear, our mobile lab. Dave, per protocol, confirm audio and visual recording has commenced, I said, my voice a low murmur, careful not to contaminate the baseline audio. He gave me a thumbs up, his face illuminated by the green glow of a monitor displaying the data feeds. We're live, Max. All channels are green. Time sync established across all devices. Baseline readings are stable, holding at a quiet 0.4 milligauss. We began our systematic sweep, walking the length of the bridge, our composite toe boots the only rhythm in the dead air. I held the EMF meter, its occasional lazy chirp the only sign of ambient energy from the old power lines strung loosely nearby. Dave followed with the main full-spectrum camera rig on a stabilizer, panning slowly and methodically across the rusted iron latticework and the crumbling lichen-covered stone supports. We called out, our voices clear and respectful, initiating the first communication phase. Is there anyone here with us tonight? We're here to listen to your story. We want to understand what happened here. For the first hour, nothing. The night remained stubbornly ordinary. The only sounds were the distant hoot of an owl and the gentle, viscous lapping of the river against its banks, logged as ambient background noise. A familiar sense of professional frustration began to build in me. The legends, the oppressive feeling, the town's fearful whispers. It was all starting to feel like another case of folklore overpowering fact. A bust. I was about to suggest we move to Phase 2, a more provocative EVP session using trigger objects, when the temperature dropped. It wasn't a gradual chill. It was a sudden, sharp plunge as if a door to a colder place had been thrown open. The EMF meter in my hand started to climb, its needle twitching erratically past the 15 milligauss mark. A faint metallic scent of ozone, a telltale sign of high-energy discharge, pricked my nostrils. A cold spot developed around us, a pocket of air so frigid it was like stepping into a walk-in freezer. Goosebumps erupted on my arms, and my breath plumed in thick white clouds in front of me. I felt a strange, greasy film settle on my exposed skin, like the condensation from some unseen, stagnant source. "Dave, confirm readings?" I whispered, not daring to break the fragile tension with a loud voice. "Confirmed," he hissed back, his camera aimed at the empty space right in front of me. "Thermal is showing a defined column dropping 20 degrees below ambient. EMF is spiking to 80-90 milligauss. It's localized about 5 feet in front of you, Max. It's right here." And then we heard it. It wasn't a voice, not at first. It was a sound of immense sadness, a soft weeping that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the bridge itself, a low-frequency harmonic that vibrated through the iron. It was everywhere and nowhere at once, a disembodied sorrow that seeped into my bones. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was what we came for. 2358. Possible Class 2 auditory phenomenon detected. "My name is Max," I said, my voice trembling slightly but keeping to procedure. "Can you tell us your name? We want to help." The weeping intensified, a chorus of grief that filled the night, overloading the parabolic mic's lower registers. Then a voice, thin and ethereal, whispered a single word through the static crackle in Dave's headset. A word that made him look at me, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and alarm. It said, "Betrayed." A confirmed Class Gram EVP. The air grew thick, heavy with an unseen sorrow and the faint metallic scent of dark residue. The story was true. We were standing in the heart of a tragedy, communicating with its echo. The weeping continued, wrapping around us like a shroud of cold static. I felt a profound sense of pity for this lost soul, forever trapped in her final moments of anguish, an imprint replaying itself for eternity. But then the sorrow began to curdle. The weeping slowly twisted, its pitch and tone shifting from grief to something far more sinister. It became a guttural enraged sobbing. The cold spot around us wasn't just cold anymore. It was biting, hostile, a physical presence that pushed against us. The EMF meter in my hand shrieked, its needle maxed out against the pin, the internal circuitry emitting a faint, high-pitched whine like a dying insect. A scent of burnt plastic briefly cutting through the cold. "Dave, something's wrong," I stammered, taking a step back as my training fought with my instinct. The emotional baseline has shifted. This isn't just sadness. This is rage. The bridge began to vibrate. Not a tremor from the earth, but a low, resonant thrum that traveled up from the soles of our feet, registering as a sustained seismic event on the geophone. The iron latticework groaned, not from age, but as if it were being squeezed by a giant unseen hand. The soft weeping was gone, replaced by a low growl that seemed to vibrate in my chest cavity, a deeply unsettling infrasound frequency that made me nauseous. Suddenly, the full-spectrum camera in Dave's hands flickered and died, its monitor going black. "System alert, unscheduled power drain on Cam 1 at Euro 15, he yelled over the noise. "Protocol requires a full diagnostic, Max." Our headlamps began to flicker in unison, their powerful LED beams reduced to strobing flashes, casting the bridge in a dizzying, disorienting succession of light and shadow. In one of those flashes of darkness, I saw her. She was standing at the far end of the bridge, a shimmering, translucent form where before there had been only empty space. She was a woman, dressed in what looked like a tattered, old-fashioned dress. Her form was indistinct, wavering like a heat haze off asphalt, the light refracting through her in bizarre, prismatic ways. But her posture was one of pure menace. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and though I couldn't see her face clearly, I could feel the searing intensity of her gaze, a tangible pressure against my forehead. "We mean you no harm," I said, raising my hands in a placating gesture. My voice a stark contrast to the storm of paranormal activity erupting around us. It was a standard de-escalation line, but it sounded hollow and useless now. The form didn't respond with words. It responded with movement. It didn't walk. It glided, moving towards us with an unnerving, frictionless speed, its form solidifying with each foot it covered. The weeping we'd heard earlier returned, but now it was a mocking, deranged sound, layered with a low, menacing laughter that echoed in polyphony. The temperature dropped further still, and I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest as if icy needles were piercing my lungs. "Max, we need to go. Abort the investigation," Dave shouted, yanking on my arm. He had abandoned the dead camera rig and was now backing away, his face a mask of primal fear. But I was frozen, mesmerized by the approaching figure. I could see her face now. Her eyes were hollow sockets of pure darkness that seemed to drink the light. and her mouth was stretched into a wide, silent vocalization of agony and fury. Her hair, long and dark, whipped around her head as if caught in a phantom gale. The presence was 20 feet away. 10. The air grew so cold it burned the skin. The growling intensified, and now it was mixed with a horrifying scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across stone. It was the sound of a desperate, futile attempt to escape. Then the narrative we thought we knew was completely shattered. From behind the approaching woman, a second figure began to coalesce out of the oppressive gloom. It was larger, broader, a hulking shadow of a man. His form was darker, more solid, radiating not sorrow, but pure, unadulterated malice that felt like a physical blow. He was the one growling. The woman wasn't the aggressor. She was the herald. She was the warning. The woman stopped, her translucent hand pointing a quivering finger not at us, but at the shadow behind her. Her silent vocalization wasn't one of rage, but of abject terror. She wasn't haunting the bridge. She was being haunted on the bridge. They were both trapped here, predator and victim. The malevolent shadow took a step forward, and the bridge groaned in protest, a long, metallic screech of stressed iron. This was the source of the oppressive energy, the entity that had twisted the woman's sorrow into a weaponized event to feed off the fear. The story wasn't about a heartbroken woman. It was about a predator and his prey locked in an eternal, violent loop. "Get back," I yelled, finally breaking from my stupor. Thornton site evacuation initiated. I grabbed Dave and we turned and ran. We didn't look back. The sounds pursued us, the woman's terrified weeping, the man's guttural roars, and a new sound, a wet, tearing noise that spoke of unspeakable violence, followed by a piercing vocalization that echoed through the night, a sound that would be seared into my memory and our audio logs forever. We scrambled into our van, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition. The battery was weak, the engine turning over sluggishly as if the energy drain from the bridge was affecting it too. The engine finally roared to life and I slammed the van into drive, tires squealing on the gravel as we sped away from Blackwood Bridge. In the rearview mirror, I saw the two figures still on the bridge. The man's dark form was standing over the woman's collapsed, shimmering shape, his outline stark against the moonlight. As we pulled away, he slowly turned his head, his featureless face aimed directly at our fleeing vehicle. Even from that distance, I could feel the waves of hatred rolling off him. We drove for miles in silence, the only sound our ragged breathing and the crackle of the radio, which we hadn't turned on. The adrenaline slowly receded, leaving behind a cold, heavy dread. We had gone to Blackwood Bridge seeking the presence of a betrayed woman. We found her, but we also found the monster who had betrayed her, an entity of pure evil, forever tormenting her in death as he had in life. The air in the van still carried the distinct coppery taste of dark residue, a phantom sensation that clawed at the back of my throat, a psychosomatic echo of the night's horrors. We never released the footage. Most of the video was corrupted, but the audio was horribly clear. What we captured was not an echo of the past. It was an ongoing nightmare, an active crime scene outside of time. There are some stories that shouldn't be told, some places that should be left to their darkness, quarantined from the living. Blackwood Bridge is one of them. We had set out to find a present to document an echo, but what we found was a prison, and a warden who would never let his captive rest. And some nights, when the wind is just right, I can still hear her weeping on the raw audio files. A desperate, eternal plea for an escape that will never come. The abyssal gaze, the silence of the abyss, was a pressure cooker for the mind. Down here, 4 kilometers beneath the waves of the North Atlantic, Elias was the single loneliest human being on the planet. His only company was the rhythmic ping of the active sonar, the gentle hum of the life support systems, and the vast, unblinking dark that pressed in on the small viewport of his submersible Triton 712s. For the next 8 hours, this was his shift. He was a senior researcher, designation specialist for the Institute of Abyssal Oceanography, a man who had long ago traded the warmth of the sun for the mysteries of the deep. A skeleton crew on the surface vessel, the Icarus, who monitored his vitals in a heavily compressed data stream. But down here, he was profoundly alone. The final pre-dive checklists had been completed at 14 Warzulu. Main thrusters, port and starboard vertical thrusters, manipulator arms, all systems green. The recycled air carried the faint metallic tang of ozone from the humming electronics rack behind his seat. The sphere of titanium and reinforced acrylic was his universe, a tiny bubble of life in a realm more hostile and alien than the surface of the moon. His mission today, designated Survey 7 Gamma, was simple: survey a newly discovered hydrothermal vent field, cataloging the strange, extremophilic life that thrived in the crushing pressure and searing heat. The journey to the vent field took him over a vast, featureless plain of silt and marine snow, the abyssal plain. It was a monotonous landscape, a desert of gray rendered in the stark green and black of his sonar display. He sipped lukewarm coffee from a thermos, his eyes performing their routine scan of the bank of monitors. Pressure stable at 40 megapascals, oxygen levels nominal, CO2 scrubbers functioning within an acceptable range, hull integrity 100%. Everything was routine. It was this routine, this rigid adherence to procedure, that kept the terror of the deep at bay. You don't think about the 4 kilometers of water above you, a weight that could crush the submersible into a ball of scrap in a nanosecond. You focus on the numbers. You trust the engineering. It was during a slow, methodical sweep of a promising section of the seafloor that something anomalous resolved on the forward sonar display. It wasn't the jagged, irregular signature of a rock formation, nor the soft, diffuse plume of a hydrothermal vent. This was a high-density return with clean, artificial lines, sharp and impossibly large. Elias frowned, leaning closer to the screen. He adjusted the gain, filtering out the background scatter. The image sharpened. It was a wreck. He cross-referenced the coordinates with the known survey exclusion zones. Nothing. Officially, this patch of seafloor was as empty as the mission brief claimed. His heart gave a little flutter of a scientist's excitement, quickly tempered by professional caution. Uncharted wrecks were the jackpots of deep-sea exploration, but deviating from a pre-approved mission plan was a serious infraction. He altered the Triton's course anyway, his fingers flying across the control panel as the electric thrusters emitted a low whine, pushing the submersible towards the signal. The powerful forward LEDs cut a cone through the eternal night, particles of marine snow swirling in the beam like a phantom blizzard. He rationalized it as a potential navigational hazard requiring documentation. Minutes later, the wreck materialized out of the gloom. It was a submarine huge and angular, its dark hull encrusted with decades of biocontamination and sediment. Elias recognized the unique profile from his historical studies. A Typhoon class, Soviet. But there were no official records of a Typhoon class being lost in this quadrant. The official story was that they were all decommissioned and scrapped at Polyarny. This one was resting on the seabed, its hull split open near the conning tower, a gaping wound in its steel hide. It was the wreck of the Odyssey, a presence from the Cold War whispered about in maritime circles. It was rumored to have been carrying a new type of sonar technology when it vanished without a trace 40 years ago. Against protocol, but spurred by a curiosity that bordered on compulsion, Elias decided to investigate. He keyed his comms. Surface at Triton 7R, logging unexpected geological formation at grid Kilo 9er, appears to be a highly metallic extrusion. Requesting discretionary time for preliminary survey. Over. The lie felt thick in his mouth, but the surface operator's tinny voice came back with a simple, acknowledged, Triton 7D. Keep us updated. He began a slow pass along the length of the dead machine, initiating log entry 2245 and documenting the wreck's dimensions and orientation. It was a tomb. The exterior was eerily motionless. The gaping hole in its side beckoned, a dark maw promising secrets. He maneuvered the Triton closer, his lights probing the darkness within. He extended arm 1, its pincer carefully tapping against a piece of torn hull plating. The material registered as HY80 steel, confirming his identification. The interior was a chaotic mess of twisted metal, broken pipes, and debris suspended in the near-zero current. He scanned the compartments methodically with the sub's external cameras, but there was no sign of the crew, not even a single decayed figure. The sub seemed to have been abandoned in an instant. As he was panning the camera across what looked like the command center, he saw it. A light. A soft, rhythmic pulse of blue-green light emanating from deep within the wreck. It wasn't the harsh, steady beam of a piece of equipment running on battery backup. It was organic, gentle, bioluminescence, but on a scale he had never seen. far beyond any known species. Driven by a scientist's need to understand, he piloted the Triton through the massive breach in the hull, its lights pushing back the oppressive darkness of the submarine's interior. The inside was even more unsettling up close. A fine layer of silt coated every surface, and armored cables hung from the ceiling like dead vines. The pulsing light grew stronger as he navigated deeper into the wreck, leading him towards the vessel's reactor compartment, a place no submersible pilot would ever willingly go. The light was coming from beyond the sealed bulkhead, seeping through the edges of a massive circular hatch. The hatch itself was slightly ajar, bent outwards as if from some immense internal pressure. He positioned the Triton so its main viewport was facing the hatch. The light from within was mesmerizing, a beautiful, undulating dance of turquoise and sapphire. He began recording, narrating his findings in a hushed, excited voice, describing the spectral frequency, the intensity, the rhythmic period. He was witnessing a new form of life, something spectacular that would redefine extremophilic biology. Then, the light changed, the gentle pulsing quickened, the colors shifting, brightening. Elias felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of nausea. The hum of his own sub's system seemed to fade, replaced by a low-frequency thrum that he felt more than heard, a vibration around 19 hertz that resonated deep in his bones. The light in the hatch coalesced, focusing into a single brilliant point. The faint, acrid scent of overloaded silica gel from the humidity scrubbers was suddenly sharp in the confined space. It was no longer just a beautiful glow. It was an intelligence. He felt it. A palpable, overwhelming sense of being watched, scrutinized. The point of light expanded, filling the entire hatchway. And within the light, something took shape. It wasn't a physical form, not in any way he could understand. It was a pattern, a complex, shifting mandala of light and shadow. As he stared, mesmerized and terrified, the pattern resolved itself. It was a face. It was immense, filling his entire field of view through the thick acrylic port. The face was crafted from pure luminescence, its features both alien and horrifyingly familiar. It had eyes that were swirling vortexes of dark energy, a mouth that was a silent O of cosmic emptiness. It wasn't angry or menacing. Its expression was one of ancient, bottomless curiosity. It was the look of a god peering into a petri dish. Elias couldn't breathe. His mind, so used to logic and data, buckled under the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but he was frozen, pinned by that abyssal gaze. The face, the presence, seemed to lean closer, its light flooding the Triton's cockpit. The air grew cold and condensation spiderwebbed across the inside of the viewport, instantly freezing into crystalline ferns. And then it showed him things, not in images, but in pure, raw understanding downloaded directly into his consciousness. He saw stars being born and dying. He saw galaxies collide. He saw the unfathomable emptiness between worlds, and the things that writhed within that emptiness. He felt the birth of the earth, the cooling of the oceans, the first spark of life in the primordial soup. He saw the long, slow crawl of evolution, and saw this entity, this silent watcher, observing it all from the crushing dark. It had been here before humanity, before the dinosaurs, before the first trilobite crawled on the seabed. It was the ocean's original and perhaps only true inhabitant. The knowledge was too much. It was a torrent of data that his primate brain was never meant to contain. He felt the delicate structures of his sanity, his identity, his very sense of self being shredded and analyzed. He felt a primal, gut-wrenching vocalization building in his throat, a sound of pure, abject terror. As quickly as it appeared, the face vanished. The light contracted back into a single point and then winked out, plunging the wreck back into absolute darkness, save for the beams of his own sub. The thrumming ceased. The cockpit of the Triton was silent again, save for his own ragged, panicked gasps. The lights on his console flickered. The power output sputtered. Event log updated. Power fluctuation detected at 2308. Secondary systems are failing to auto-compensate, he murmured, his voice a dry rasp. With trembling hands, he slammed the controls for the thrusters into reverse, clumsily backing the submersible out of the wreck's gaping wound. He didn't look back. He pushed the ascent controls to their maximum, engaging the emergency ballast blow. The Triton began to rise, far faster than protocol allowed, a panicked flight towards a surface he wasn't sure he would recognize. The ascent was a cacophony of automated alarms. Master warning flashed in red on his main display. The structural integrity monitor screamed with hull stress warnings as the submersible shot upwards through the immense water column. He ignored them all, his eyes fixed on the depth gauge, watching the numbers slowly, agonizingly decrease. He kept glancing at the viewport, terrified he would see that luminous face materializing from the dark, coming to reclaim its specimen. But there was nothing, only the endless, suffocating black. Hours later, the Triton 7 breached the surface, bobbing in the gray, choppy waves of the morning. The Icarus recovery team was there in minutes, winching the sub aboard. When they finally cracked the hatch, they found Elias huddled in the corner of the cockpit, shivering uncontrollably despite the cabin's warmth. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unfocused. He was debriefed for weeks by a rotating panel of institute heads and psychologists. He told them about the wreck, but he couldn't speak of the light. He couldn't describe the face. How could he explain that he had looked into the eyes of the abyss itself, and that it had looked back? The data recorder from the Triton was corrupted. All the video from the time he was inside the wreck was just a solid block of digital noise. His mission log was filled with frantic, nonsensical entries about pre-cosmic patterns and to the Watcher. They showed him printouts of the Triton's other data logs. The sensor readings from just before and after the corrupted section were telling. A massive, unidentifiable energy spike, an extreme temperature drop in the cockpit, and a gravitational anomaly the system couldn't even quantify. Officially, he was declared medically unfit for duty, suffering from extreme pressure-induced psychosis. Elias never went back to the sea. He lives in a small house now, hundreds of miles from the nearest coast. He keeps the blinds drawn day and night. The darkness of a room is comforting, but sometimes in the dead of night when he closes his eyes he sees it. A soft blue-green pulse of light in the corner of his vision. He feels a low thrum resonating in his chest. He feels the pressure of the deep, the weight of 4 kilometers of water, and he feels the gaze, the ancient, curious, and eternal gaze of the thing that waits in the dark, watching the world through the window of the abyss. The pressure. The abyss doesn't care about you. That's what old-timers on the rig would say, their faces etched with the memory of deep water pressure and unending darkness. Leo, suspended in the claustrophobic confines of the Angler, a one-man submersible and mobile welding habitat, felt the truth of that statement in his bones. He was a saturation diver, a specialist, a man who lived and worked at depths that would turn a normal human being into a red cloud in a squashed can. His current home was a tiny pressurized habitat 2,000 feet below the surface of the North Atlantic, a steel bubble tethered to the seabed next to a massive transatlantic data cable. The air inside hummed with the sound of life support, thick with helium that gave his voice a slightly tinny, cartoonish quality he'd long since grown accustomed to. His job was simple on paper: repair a section of armored casing that had been damaged by what the logs called a geological event, a polite term for a localized undersea landslide. For 5 days he'd worked in the crushing blackness, the only light coming from the Angler's powerful external lamps and the brilliant, sputtering arc of his welding torch. The world was reduced to a 10-foot circle of illuminated silt and steel. Beyond that, infinity. He ran a final diagnostic on his suit's comms system. The familiar static hiss, a strange comfort. Surface, this is Angler. Final checks complete. Ready for EVA on your mark. Sarah's voice, filtered through miles of cable and sophisticated electronics, was a lifeline. Solid copy, Angler. We rate you 5 by 5. The board is green on our end. All umbilical connections are solid. You are clear for egress. Pressure is stable. We'll be monitoring vitals and suit integrity. Non-copy that, Surface. Leo initiated the habitat's outer door sequence. The air carried the faint, sharp tang of ozone from the atmospheric scrubbers, a sterile scent that did little to calm his nerves. Water thick and heavy as oil flooded the small airlock. He felt the familiar, immense squeeze as the external pressure equalized. It was a feeling he never quite got used to. The universe trying to erase the space he occupied. With a hiss of hydraulics, the outer hatch irised open, revealing the abyssal plain. His suit lamps cut through the darkness, particles of marine snow swirling like a ghostly blizzard. The damaged cable lay before him, a thick black serpent half buried in mud. A section of its armored plating was peeled back, exposing the delicate fiber optic core. Beginning approach to the worksite, he reported, his voice a low monotone. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man in a $500,000 suit that weighed nearly 1,000 pounds on the surface, but was neutrally buoyant down here. Each step was a careful, calculated effort, his magnetic boots clanking softly against the angler's hull before he stepped onto the silty seabed. He knelt, the focused beam of his helmet lamp illuminating the damage. It was worse than the ROV footage had shown. The steel was torn, not bent, with jagged edges that looked almost like teeth marks. His suit's external atmospheric sensors registered a spike in particulate matter, feeding a data line to his HUD. The scent profile was acrid, the raw, metallic tang of sheared durasteel mixed with ancient sediment. Surface, the damage is unusual, he said, his brow furrowing. The tearing on the C4 quadrant is inconsistent with simple abrasion or impact. Requesting we cross-reference the geological data. This doesn't look like rock damage. There was a pause. Copy, Leo. Running a comparative analysis now. Proceed with caution. He spent the next hour meticulously cleaning the damaged area, his tools humming and whirring in the profound silence. There was a rhythm to the work, a familiar dance of procedure and precision that kept the creeping dread of the deep at bay. Clean prep weld, a mantra against the darkness. It was during a pause waiting for a weld to cool that he heard it. It wasn't a sound, not in the traditional sense. It was a feeling, a low-frequency vibration that resonated through the water, through the rock, through the soles of his boots and up into his chest. It was a deep guttural thrum like the lowest note on a Titanic pipe organ. Surface, did you register that? He asked, his head snapping up, his light scanning the impenetrable wall of black beyond his work area. A seismic tremor, maybe? In negative angler. Sarah's voice was tight. No seismic activity on any of our sensors. Geology is clear. What did you experience? In a vibration. Very low frequency. Can you check hydrophones? And hydrophones are active, stand by. Filtering out standard cetacean and crustacean signatures now. Leo, we're getting something, but it's not matching any known profiles. Not geological, not biological, it's patterned. Before Leo could respond, it happened again. The same thrum, but closer, more defined. It was accompanied by a faint, high-pitched clicking, a sound like 1,000 nails tapping on glass. The sound was directional. It was coming from the darkness in front of him. It's moving, Leo whispered, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. Something's out there when Leo, your heart rate is spiking, Sarah said, her professional calm wavering. Stay frosty. It's probably a whale pod, or a submersible from another outfit that hasn't logged its position. We get signals contamination all in a single piercing vocalization cut her off. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't mechanical. It was sharp, intelligent, and filled with a malice that transcended the crushing pressure in the cold. It was a sound that had no business being in the deep sea. The line went dead. Sarah? Surface, do you copy? Leo yelled, his voice cracking. Sarah? Static. Only static. The carrier signal was gone. Not just interference, a total disconnect. The thrumming stopped. The clicking stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. It was heavy, expectant. Log entry 34715. Unidentified acoustic event. Comms protocol was violated. Leo confirmed status. That would be her log, he thought. Procedure, always procedure. But she didn't say it. There was just silence. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He scrambled backward, his heavy boots kicking up clouds of silt obscuring his view. He fumbled for his welding torch, brandishing it like an object of protection. Its bright, inert tip seemed pathetic against the infinite dark. He had to get back to the angler. He turned, disoriented, the silt cloud he'd created now a swirling, opaque barrier between him and his only sanctuary. His breath ragged, fogging the inside of his helmet. His suit's recycler was kicking into overdrive, humming loudly in his ears. Then he saw it. For a split second, a shape was silhouetted in the swirling mud, illuminated by his swinging headlamp. It was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at angles that were fundamentally wrong. It was there and then it was gone, swallowed by the gloom. No, he breathed, stumbling back and falling. He landed hard on his back, the impact jarring his teeth. From his new vantage point, looking up, he saw the underbelly of the angler. Its landing struts dug into the muck, and he saw something else. Clinging to the side of the submersible was a figure. No, not a figure, figures, 3 of them. They were humanoid in shape, but emaciated. Their skin a pale, bioluminescent white that pulsed with a soft, sickly light. They moved with a slow, twitching grace, their long, multi-jointed fingers ending in needle-sharp claws that scraped against the angler's hull. The sound was the clicking he'd heard. Their heads were smooth, featureless except for a single gaping maw that opened and closed in a silent, rhythmic pulse. They weren't swimming. They were crawling, clinging to the metal like abyssal spiders. Leo's mind reeled. Hallucination, nitrogen narcosis, high-pressure nervous syndrome. He ran through the checklist of deep-sea maladies, his rational mind desperately seeking a clinical explanation. But this was no symptom. This was real. One of the creatures detached itself from the hull and began to descend toward him, its long limbs unfolding. It moved with an unnerving fluidity, unhindered by the immense pressure. He couldn't make a sound. The part of his brain that controlled vocalization had simply shut down. He could only watch as the thing drifted down, its silent, pulsing mouth growing larger, a sudden, jarring impact to his left. He snapped his head around. His welding torch, which he had dropped, had been kicked by his flailing. It rolled a few feet and came to rest against a rock. The creature was almost on him. Its proximity was a physical force, a wave of cold that penetrated his suit. He could see the intricate, almost crystalline structure of its pale skin. Instinct took over. He lunged, not away but sideways, grabbing the heavy torch. It was clumsy, not designed for use as a club, but it was all he had. He swung it wildly as the creature descended upon him. He connected. The heavy tool struck the creature's slender torso with a wet, solid thud. There was no sound of pain, no reaction. It simply folded. Its limbs tangled, its body contorted, and it drifted away into the dark, tumbling slowly, its pale light fading. He didn't have time for relief. The other 2 were crawling down the angler's hull, faster now. Their movements were jerky, agitated. His comms crackled to life. It wasn't Sarah. It was a chorus of wet, guttural clicks and a long, low moan, the desperate vocalizations of the dying. The sounds of another crew, another time. The sounds from the rig's black box, the one they'd lost last year on the other side of the trench. The one they never found. They were broadcasting his fear back at him. Leo scrambled to his feet and ran, a clumsy, stumbling sprint back toward the airlock. The 2 creatures dropped from the hull, landing silently on the seabed behind him, their bioluminescence casting long, distorted shadows that danced in the swirling silt. He reached the airlock, slamming his hand against the control panel. The massive iris began to close, too slow. One of the creatures was on him. A needle-sharp claw sliced across his helmet's faceplate, leaving a deep, screeching gouge. The composite glass held, but the shriek of the impact vibrated through his skull. He fell into the airlock as the door slid shut, the creature's thin, white arm caught in the mechanism. The appendage twitched and spasmed, trapped in the thick steel. The outer door groaned but sealed. He slammed the panel to start the drain cycle, the pumps roaring to life, forcing the water out. Through the meter-thick portal of the inner door, he could see the other creature. It pressed its featureless face against the outer hatch's viewport, its gaping mouth pulsing. It wasn't trying to get in, it was just watching him. The drain cycle completed with a final shuddering clang. The arm, severed, fell to the metal grating of the airlock floor. It was still twitching, a pale, segmented horror. A smear of dark residue, thick and oily, oozed from the severed end. He stumbled through the inner door into the relative safety of the habitat, sealing it behind him. He collapsed against the wall, his breath coming in ragged, painful sobs. His hands shook uncontrollably, his comm crackled again. Static, then a voice. Garbled, distant. Glurp. This is... Do you copy? Respond. It was Sarah. Sarah. He gasped, his voice hoarse. Oh, Sarah, they're here. They're outside. An angler, this is surface. We have you back. Her voice was sharp, professional, hiding the fear. Comms blackout logged from 0347 through 0351. We registered a massive, unidentified energy spike from the angler's primary power conduit. Report status immediately. Not an energy spike, he panted, staring at the severed arm on the floor of the airlock, which had finally stopped moving. I hit one of them. With the torch. It just folded. There are more. They took out the comms. A long silence. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was low, trembling. Leo, the crew from Site Gamma, from last year. We recovered a fragment of their final comms log. They reported, angels in the dark. They said they were beautiful. And then there was just a final vocalization. Leo looked at the CCTV monitor that showed the exterior of the habitat. The creature was still there, pressed against the viewport, its silent mouth opening and closing. Waiting. They're not angels, Leo whispered, his gaze fixed on the screen. He knew then that the geological event that damaged the cable wasn't a landslide. The cable hadn't just been damaged. It had been used as bait. The next 8 hours were the longest of Leo's life. He sat huddled in the habitat, watching the screens, listening to the silence. The creature never moved from the viewport. At sporadic intervals, he would see another one drift by in the darkness, a pale light in the eternal night. Sarah and the surface crew were working on a rescue plan, but they were hours away. The nearest rescue submersible was on a different rig, a 6-hour transit at best. Protocol demanded they wait for a full support team. Protocol wouldn't save him. The power began to fluctuate. The lights inside the habitat flickered. Logs to 832. Main power bus showing intermittent failure. Voltage dropping in 5% increments. Backup battery at 98% but will not sustain life support for more than 90 minutes post-primary failure. Sarah, I'm losing primary power, he said, his voice eerily calm. He was past panic now, in a state of cold, resigned clarity. We see it, Leo. Something is drawing massive amounts of power from the angler's external conduits. It's like something is feeding on it. Leo looked at the monitor. The creature at the viewport was glowing brighter now, its rhythmic pulsing faster. He could see the energy arcing from the submersible's hull to its pale skin. They weren't just here to neutralize him. They were eating his ride home. They're draining the power, he stated. Once it's gone, life support will fail. Our Leo. Sarah's voice broke. The ROV is on its way, just hold on. The lights flickered again, then went out, plunging him into total darkness. The emergency batteries kicked in, casting the small habitat in a dim red glow. The hum of the main recycler died, replaced by the frantic, high-pitched whine of the emergency backup. It wouldn't last long. On the monitor, the creatures were now glowing brilliantly. There were dozens of them, maybe more, swarming the angler. They pulsed in unison, a silent, terrible symphony of light. They had been drawn by the energy discharge from when he'd struck the first one. And now they feasted. He heard a new sound, a high-pitched, grinding screech, metal tearing. He switched the CCTV camera to the arm manipulator. One of the creatures was methodically tearing the welding arm from its socket, its needle claws peeling back the reinforced durasteel, as if it were foil. They weren't just feeding. They were dismantling it, taking it apart. He knew what he had to do. There was no rescue coming. The angler was a tomb, and he was just delaying the inevitable. But he wouldn't be just another black box recording of a vocalization. Sarah, he said, his voice steady. Tell my family I love them. And Leo, no, don't overload the primary reactor. What? Leo, that's a negative. That is not protocol. I can't, and you don't have to, he said, pulling up the master control panel on his wrist-mounted interface. His access codes were for maintenance, not self-destruct, but he knew the systems. He knew their flaws. He could bypass the safety governors, forcing a cascade failure in the magnetic containment field. It was a dirty hack, one he'd only theorized in simulations. It's the only way to be sure. You can't let them spread. You can't let them reach another power source. He looked at the screen. The presence of a man long gone, a warning given too late. He thought about the men on Site Gamma. Sarah, he said, his fingers flying across the panel. They're not angels. Another vocalization, closer this time, echoed through the hull, a sound of imminent arrival. The grinding stopped. They're just hungry, and he bypassed the final governor. A new alarm, one he'd never heard before, began to blare in the red-lit darkness. Reactor overload in 30 seconds. Through the portal, he saw the creature at the viewport recoil. All the lights, all the pulsing stopped. The swarm of creatures turned as one from the dying angler and faced the habitat. They knew. Leo, God, I'm sorry, Sarah sobbed over the comm. Just make sure you get the data, he said, almost smiling. Tell them what's down here. He watched the viewport as they came for him, a silent, glowing tide of wrongness surging through the dark. He saw their pulsing mouths, their needle claws, their featureless faces. He saw what was left of the figure of a man in a different company's suit, tangled in the limbs of one of the creatures, his helmet shattered. The vocalizing stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of the alarm and his own heartbeat. Then, there was only light.